What up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto creates his own sword style? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. A boy with shocking blue eyes, blonde hair and whisker marks on his face was silently crying in a small and dark alley, just out of the view of people walking down the street. He had recently been kicked out of the orphanage he had been staying at just for asking for more food. The carekeeper had exploded on him, telling him he had gotten enough to eat and should be grateful that he had even got the food he had gotten, which was a stale piece of bread and a rotting banana. The carekeeper had promptly thrown him outside, telling him to go away, and if he had ever come back again, they would report him for trespassing. So he was stuck wandering the streets with many people throwing glares at him. Some had even thrown rocks and left several bruises on his body. He was rubbing his bruises when he heard shouts to find the demon and to finish him off. He stood up as quickly as his weakened body could and ran in the opposite direction from where the voices were coming from. Unfortunately for him, one of the crowd member had seen him run out of the alley and proceeded to rally everyone to give chase. The chase ran by a solitary man who was wearing a bamboo hat, carrying a sword, and had hand-woven basket of his back that had several items inside, including an umbrella. The man's eyes followed the boy and had made brief contact with the boy's eyes. They showed fear and pain, but the one that had stood out was sadness. He watched the boy run by, followed by the mob close behind, yelling, "Demon," and other insults. He stood in the same spot for several more seconds before continuing his path, before slowing to a stop again and looking behind to where the boy and the mob had gone. Several minutes later, in a dead-end alley, the boy was scrambling around trying to climb the wall that was blocking the alley. He gave up and trying to climb the wall and turned around to see that his only escape route was blocked by an approaching wall of angry-looking people. He screamed out to not to hurt then, but he was only answered with a hail of rocks, bottles and dirt. "Well, did you stop when you killed my wife, demon? Did you stop when you wreaked havoc across our lands and killed thousands of innocent people? Tonight, you pay for your crimes, QB." The man pulled out a kunai and approached the boy and brought his hand down upon the boy's head. The boy closed his eyes knowing he was going to die. He waited for several seconds, and when he didn't feel anything, he had opened up his eyes again and saw the man who he had run by earlier had his hand wrapped around the wrist of his would-be killer. "I suggest you drop the weapon if you don't want to have your arm broken in half." The stranger applied more pressure to the man's wrist and the kunai was dropped. The stranger then with a single fluid motion threw the assailant back to the crowd where he was caught before he hit the ground. The man had picked himself up again and pointed an accusing finger at the stranger. "Why are you helping the demon, stranger?" "Because I don't see a demon. What I see is a malnourished young boy that is being chased by a mob full of fools," said the stranger. "Well, I guess that is too bad. I guess we will have to kill you first and then we can kill the demon." And he motioned the crowd to move closer, which had attracted the attention of several drunk chunin and junin that had heard the noise and came to investigate. One that wasn't fully drunk came over to the crowd and asked what was happening. One of the crowd members told of what was happening, and the ninja promptly called his friends over to deal with the problem. They pushed their way to the front of the crowd where they saw the stranger standing in front the demon child, preventing anyone from approaching it. The ninja that was leading the group, seeing that the stranger was only armed with a sword and deduced that he wasn't a ninja, thought to himself, "It seems that this fool thinks he can defend this boy with a sword against us ninja and a mob. He will die along with the boy." He pulled out several kunais out of his pockets while his drunk friends did the same. They all threw their kunais at once, expecting the swordman not to be able to protect himself and the demon at once. The swordman quickly pulled the umbrella out of his pack and opened it, spinning it around, deflecting all of the kunais and dropping them to the ground. The ninja present all gritted their teeth and started to pull more kunais present to take out the man. They stopped in their tracks when the man had made eye contact with them, and they instantly froze up. They saw the swordman's eyes were gleaming red and they instantly felt like running away, but their bodies would not respond. The man put his pack down on the ground and slowly approached them with his sword in hand. The junin who had led them in had managed to break out of the man's freezing glare and rushed the swordman, hoping to stab him and finish him off. Unfortunately, that was his last move when he heard a sword being unsheathed and a flash of metal. Next thing he knew was his vision was being split into two before he split apart and fell into two piles of flesh and blood. The swordman turned his gaze toward the rest of the crowd and asked in a deep voice, "Who else wants to come forward?" The rest of the mob had, along with the ninja, made a mad rush to escape from the alleyway, but everyone was gone. One of the ninja had stayed back and said, "There will be blood to be paid. Remember that, swordman," and he dashed off into the night. The swordman resheathed his sword and approached the boy, who was huddled in fear at what the man had just done. The swordman extended his hand out and the boy tentatively took the hand. The man hoisted him up and looked at the boy carefully. He saw that the boy was severely underfed. The clothes on his body were rags that were sewed together and had many small cuts on his body. The swordman stood up and motioned for the boy to follow him. The boy followed him obediently. He followed closely behind, almost clinging onto the swordman's legs, and followed him into a restaurant that was still opened at that time. He motioned for the boy to sit down on a chair next to him. The boy sat down and the swordman had ordered 2 bowls of ramen. They both waited silently, and when the food had come, the swordman had started to eat, but the boy just looked confusedly at the bowl. The swordman took note of this and motioned to the boy that the food was his to eat, and the boy started to eat it slowly, eyes darting around in fear that someone would take his food away. The moment that food touched his lips, though, he felt at ease and quickly finished the bowl. The swordman had soon finished his own bowl. He bowed and said thank you to the waitress and left money on the counter. They both stood up to leave, and the instant they were outside, the swordman was surrounded by several Anbu with swords to his neck. "You are put under arrest for the murder of a Konoha ninja. You are to come with us to await trial with our Hokage," said an eagle-masked Anbu. "I see. I will do that under one condition." He motioned with his eyes to the boy. "He comes with me," said the swordman with a calm voice. "You are not in any condition to be bargaining with us," replied the eagle-masked Anbu. "And your citizens have no right to attack an innocent young boy, who will be attacked again the instant I leave. Once again, I ask that the boy comes with me," he countered with the same calm voice. "Fine." The eagle-masked Anbu motioned for one of his subordinate to pick up the boy. The Anbu picked up the boy, who struggled against his holder, but when he caught sight of the swordman's eyes, he stopped, knowing he would be safe. The Anbu poofed away with the swordman and the boy in tow, and they appeared in the Hokage's office. The Hokage dismissed the Anbu and they poofed away again. The young boy ran toward the Hokage saying, "Oiji-sama," and he was swept up into a hug by the old leader. The swordman gave a small smile at the scene before returning his stoic face. The Hokage put down the young boy and looked at the swordman with analyzing eyes for several seconds. "My name is Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage. So you are the young man that saved this boy?" "Well, I would hardly call myself young. Are you kidding me? You look like you are in your early teens," replied the old leader. "Actually, I am in my early 20s. A lot of people tend to mess up my age because of how I look. I would like to know the name of the young boy that I have saved, though." Sarutobi looked at the young boy, who had fallen asleep on the couch which he had seated himself on. "His name is Naruto Uzumaki." "Okay, now that I know his name, why in the world were your citizens and also several of your ninja attacking this boy?" The old Hokage looked at him sadly and said, "It is Bekusu. He contains a demon inside him." The swordman made to say something but was cut off. "Don't say anything until I have finished his story." The swordman nodded in response. "About 4 years ago, the 9-tailed demon fox, Kyubi, attacked our village. We battled it for days, preventing it from reaching our village. When all hope was lost, the 4th Hokage appeared on the battlefield where he had summoned up his summon, Gamabunta, and charged the demon. They clashed for a few seconds when the 4th Hokage did a forbidden kinjutsu which defeated the 9-tailed fox but also sacrificed his life. But something of that power could not be killed or sealed into inanimate objects, so he sealed it into a newborn baby. That baby is the boy you see sleeping before you. But that doesn't explain why this boy is being hunted like an animal. After the 4th was dead, I was reinstated as the Hokage, and after a brutal meeting with the council head, I had passed a law that would prevent the older generation from telling the truth of that night to any of the younger generation, as there was much anger toward this boy and what he had done to the 4th, said the 3rd Hokage. "I see. I was wondering, do you have a picture of this 4th Hokage?" The 3rd Hokage was perplexed by the question but guided the swordman into a side room in the office. Above a small shrine, there were pictures of all of the previous Hokages. The third pointed at the one that was the fourth, and the swordman looked at it before saying, "That boy is the son of the fourth Hokage, is he not?" The third Hokage was completely taken by surprise by the swordman's question that he couldn't properly string together his words. He tried to stutter out words but was unable to. Looking at the expression on your face and your inability to say anything, I would assume I have hit the nail of the head. But why keep a secret of the true identity of the boy? Said the swordman. It is because the fourth had many enemies at the time, mostly with Rock, and also that his marriage was a secret. If word had gotten out that the fourth had a family, there would have been assassination and kidnapping attempts to try to break the fourth Hokage. In that case, what was the fourth's name? His name in Minato Namikaze, and perhaps the best shinobi this village had ever produced. The swordman stood silently for several seconds looking at Naruto. If I could Hokage-sama, would it be possible if I could adopt Naruto and bring him with me on my travels? The Hokage looked at him with a suspicious eye. Why would a stranger like you want to bring a young boy with him on his journey? Because he has an indomitable spirit and great potential, but it won't help if he is surrounded by people that hate his very presence. The Hokage was about to speak out against but was cut off. You may have passed out laws preventing people from openly telling Naruto is the holder of the nine-tailed fox, Kyuubi, but doesn't stop people from acting out against him. Even you, the Hokage, can't kill a large majority if not everyone in this village who hates Naruto, because if you did, this village wouldn't be much of a village. The Hokage was sad, but he knew that was the truth. Alright then, swordman. I give you the rights to adopt Naruto and permission to allow him passage out of this village, but do you plan to bring him back? Naruto's path is destined to be a ninja, so I will bring him back when he is old enough to enroll to become a student. But that doesn't mean I can't teach him during his absence from the village. I would like some ninja scrolls from which he can learn from on his own," said the swordman with a smile. I see. The Hokage had pulled out several pieces of paper and had already filled out most of it already. He handed the swordman a pen and asked him to sign his name. The swordman signed his name and picked up Naruto. The Hokage went into his ninja scroll library and pulled out basic techniques, chakra control and several others and gave them to the swordman. I will see you in several years, Hokage-sama. The swordman gave him a quick nod before he turned his back and left the room. The Hokage looked down at the name that was signed. Himura Kenshin, huh? Wonder how the next several years will turn for Kenshin and Naruto. Yay, I finished rewriting my first chapter. I hope you guys like it. As for characters, many of the characters will be the same. The story will be reworked. Pairings maybe changes around, though it will stay Naru x Hina. I hope this chapter is better than my previous. Peace out, everyone. The return of Naruto. 5 years later, the Hokage was fighting his greatest enemy, paperwork, when he had decided to take a break and take a look out his window at Konoha. Well, it's been 5 years since Kenshin adopted Naruto and took him on his travels. I wonder when they will be coming back. Outside the gates of Konoha. Well, we are back, Naruto, said Kenshin to a small back who was wearing almost the same attire as himself, except for a skin-tight mask that covered his lower face. Naruto just gave a small nod with his head to show that he had heard. Let's go to the Hokage so that we can get you checked in. They both walked up to the gate and the gate watchers just let them by without stopping to ask who there were. Back in the Hokage's office. The Hokage was back to fighting his never-ending pile of paperwork when he heard a knock on his door. Come in. His eyes lit up when he saw Naruto and Kenshin walk through the door. Well, it has been a long time, Naruto. Naruto removed the mask from his face and gave a rare smile that only people he trusted had ever seen before he had placed the mask back. Well, I can assume since you came back, Naruto will be enrolling in the Ninja Academy? Kenshin gave a nod while Naruto looked indifferent. The Hokage brought some papers that needed to be signed so that Naruto could be enrolled. Well, since Naruto is going to school, I would assume a place to live would also be needed? A small apartment should do it for the both of us, said Kenshin. Alright, then. The Hokage pulled out a spare key from his desk and told an address to Kenshin. So what has Naruto been learning over these past few years? Kenshin thought for a moment before giving his answers. Aside from all the scrolls and swordmanship, he has picked up quite a few hobbies. Hunting and playing music are just two of them. The Hokage was in shock that Naruto was able to master all of the scrolls that were given to him, along with sword training, and still have some time to have hobbies. Well, it seems that Naruto is well prepared to enter the academy. You are free to go now. Kenshin and Naruto both bowed and left the room, leaving the Hokage to deal with a new stack of paperwork that had appeared out of nowhere. The next day, Naruto woke up groggily and rubbed his eyes and realized that he had to get to quickly pulled on a shirt and pulled on his pants and grabbed his mask on the way out of his room. Well, it's about time you woke up, sleepyhead. I was wondering when you would wake up, called out Kenshin from the kitchen. Naruto ran by the table and grabbed a piece of toast that was lying on the table and rusaged out the door. Kenshin just smiled at Naruto and proceeded to clean up. At the Ninja Academy, the whole class was chatting with each other, while a large portion of the girls were throwing looks at Sasuke Uchiha and giggling behind their hands. Iruka-sensei had walked into the room and the entire class settled down and went into their seats. Iruka stood in front of the entire class and started to call out names, and everyone said various things to show they were present. Iruka then wondered when the new student would show up when the door opened up. All eyes turned to the door and saw Naruto with his wild blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a mask that covered his face. Most of the girls who were ogling Sasuke all started to ogle Naruto. Today class, we have a new student joining us today. Why don't you come forward and introduce yourself? Naruto walked to the front of the class and said, "My name is Naruto Himura Uzumaki. I hope I will come to know all of you well and hopefully we can become friends." His voice showed no emotion and he looked at the class with eyes that showed no emotion. The entire class shivered when they saw his eyes, and even Iruka had to shake himself awake. "Naruto, why don't you go sit next to Hinata? There is a seat by her. Hinata, could you please raise your hand to show where you are?" Hinata shyly rose her hand and Naruto walked up the steps with every pair of eyes looking at him. He sat down and Hinata seemingly turned from her usually pale white color to a bright red. Iruka then brought everyone attention to the board where they started their lesson. Later during the lunch break, Naruto was sitting quietly on a bench while a large group of giggling girls were staring at him. He glanced in their direction and they seemed to whisper and giggle some more. Naruto shook his head, knowing he would never understand girls. He then felt a tug on his shirt and he was face to face with Sasuke Uchiha. "Who the heck do you think you are to just come in here and act all tough and cool like that?" Naruto glanced down at Sasuke's hand on his shirt and pointed at it. "Could you please remove your hand from my shirt, please?" he said in a pleasant voice. Sasuke's eyes lit up at this comment and pulled his fist to punch Naruto in the face. Iruka at that exact had appeared outside to call them back in, and Sasuke scoffed and whispered in Naruto's calm face. "You're lucky Iruka-sensei came outside, or else you would have been beaten into the dust." Naruto just looked at him with eyes that betrayed no emotions and walked into the class with a group of girls in his wake. "In class. Today, class. W will be sparring today. I will pair you up with a partner and we will take turns sparring against each other." Itruka started to go down his list and was left with 3 names at the end. "Sasuke, Naruto and Hinata, since you 3 happen to be the last people not partnered, there will be a 3-way spar. Is that okay with you guys?" Hinata gave a small nod, Sasuke gave a HN, and Naruto just stared at Iruka, which he figured to be a yes. The entire class moved to the sparring room where all the matches went off without a hitch except for the occasional bruise that would show after EV match. The entire class all wanted to watch the last match. Beketsu it would have Hinata Hagia, whose family was said to be skilled in taijutsu, Sasuke Uchiha, the last Uchiha and a proclaimed genius, and Naruto Uzumaki, the mysterious person. All 3 stood in the ring with Hinata in her family's taijutsu stance, the gentle fist. Sasuke stood with his fists closed tightly around his body and Naruto stood there with his hands at his side. The class looked at him oddly, wondering why he wasn't readying himself, but Iruka started the match. Hinata hesitated but went after Naruto first while Sasuke dashed toward Naruto with a SPPED not normal for a genin. Naruto quickly sidestepped Sasuke's charge and spun around, lightly pushing Hinata, making her lose her balance. Both recomposed themselves and made to go after Naruto again. Naruto dodged all of their attacks and soon both were breathing hard and sweating while Naruto had barely broken a sweat. Hinata, who started to feel lightheaded from her exhaustion, started to sway back and forth and tripped over her own feet. She had expected to hit the floor, so she had closed her eyes, but was caught by a pair of strong hands. She opened them again and she found herself staring into two bright blue eyes and quickly started to blush. Naruto, seeing that Hinata was falling over, had caught her before she had hit the floor. He looked into her pale lavender eyes and thought, she has really pretty eyes. But why is she blushing? Naruto's train of thought was interrupted though when he felt Sasuke attacking him from behind. He quickly placed Hinata on the ground and spun around, grabbing Naruto's incoming fist, and quickly pulled Sasuke's hand behind his back and pinned Sasuke against the ground. Sasuke, who had finally found an opening when Naruto had caught Hinata, had ran forward, hoping to knock Naruto out with a punch to the head. He quickly found himself on the ground with his arm behind his back. How the hell was he able to know I was about to attack him? I'm the last Uchiha, no one is supposed to be stronger than me. He shouldn't be able to do this. He then heard Naruto whisper in his ear, I suggest you lose the I'm superior to everyone act, or the next several years will be a pain in the ass for you. Iruka had called the match and the entire class was in shock that neither Sasuke or Hinata were able to land a hit on Naruto, and that Naruto had won by forcing his opponents to wear themselves out. The entire group of girls that had cheered Naruto were now waving banners that had appeared out of nowhere that had various phrases that were Naruto-based. Naruto got off of Sasuke and dusted off his hands. He went to go check Hinata, who had now recovered though her face was still flushed. Naruto bowed to both and left the sparring area with eyes of the class following him. Class is over for today, kids. You guys are free to go now. There was an immediate rush for the door as all the kids piled out of the room. Naruto Himura Uzumaki, huh? Seems he is going to fit in just fine. I just wonder how crazy the next few years will be though. Graduation exams. Naruto woke up to the sun shining down on his face and he rubbed his eyes and looked at the clock. It read 6:30 and Naruto shook himself awake and prepared himself for the coming day. He put on his mask and went out into the kitchen, where he pulled out a cup of instant ramen and poured hot water into the cup. He put a book on top of it so the heat would stay inside. He leaned up against the counter and started to reflect everything that had happened over the 3 years since he had arrived back in Konoha. The first, becoming friends with Hinata. Flashback. Naruto was sitting on the roof of the school, eating his lunch and fiddling around with his flute, to escape the rabid fangirls that would follow either him or Sasuke around. He put his lips to the flute to start playing when he heard movement from the stairs. Who on the stairs? He asked loudly. There was a small squeak and someone who he wasn't expecting came into view. It was Hinata Hyuga, who in his opinion was one of the strongest kunoichi in his class but had a very bad self-confidence problem. So, why are you following me, Hinata? She averted her eyes away from Naruto and kept her head down. IW was just WW wondering why you eat lunch so I decided to follow you. Naruto looked at her carefully and sensed no deceit in her voice. I see, Hinata, since you are up here, would like to stay and listen to me play? He motioned to his flute. Hinata nodded and seated herself on the same bench Naruto was sitting. She hadn't noticed that Naruto had pulled down his mask to eat and was now preparing to play. Naruto put his lips to the flute and out came some melancholy music that Hinata was able to connect with. Think sadness and sorrow here. Hinata just closed her eyes and listened to the tune, swaying back and forth with the music. The music had stopped, and when Hinata opened her eyes again, she saw Naruto had disappeared and there was a large crowd of fangirls who had heard his music and rushed up here to try and find him. Hinata then felt something in her lap and looked down to see the flute was there. On it there was a note attached. It said, "This was my first flute I got. Please take it as a sign of our friendship." Hinata stared at the note with a blush on her face. Flashback ends. Naruto smiled at that memory and wondered where Hinata had placed the flute. He noted again that the house was empty except for himself and reflected the day that Kenshin had left on his journey. Flashback. Naruto was getting back from another day from the academy and had arrived at the apartment when he and Kenshin lived. When he opened the door, he saw that Kenshin was wearing his traveling straw hat and was wearing his basket again. Naruto looked confusedly and asked, "Kenshin, where are you going?" Kenshin turned around and looked at Naruto. "Naruto, it is time for me to move on again. Naruto immediately rushed Kenshin and hugged his leg. "You can't go. I need you." Kenshin removed Naruto from his leg and knelt down. "Look, Naruto. I know you don't want me to go, but I have many more things to do and I can't do them here in Konoha." Naruto looked at him with defiant eyes. "Then, take me with you." But he already knew the answer. Kenshin sighed. "You know I can't do that, Naruto. You deserve a better life than living on the road with me." Naruto conceded and looked up at him with teary eyes. Kenshin pulled him into a hug. He then stood up and hefted his basket. He went to the door and told Naruto, "On the counter, I have left several items for you. 2 of them are swords, both different in their purops. I will leave it up to you for which one to wield. The rest are scrolls in which I have recorded all I know about hidden Mitsurugi Ryu style along with more advanced scrolls that HTE Hokage had provided. I trust you will use them to their fullest potential. The last scroll is something I asked the Hokage to put together which contains many of your hobbies and interests. I hope you do well, and I will be coming back to check up on how you are doing." With that said, Kenshin opened the door and walked out, leaving Naruto alone in the apartment. Flashback ends. Since then, Naruto had trained non-stop since the day Kenshin left and he felt his skills were near Chunin level if not Hijr, but that was just a self-evaluation so he couldn't be too sure. Unfortunately during one of the training matched, he met face to face with his tenant. Flashback. Naruto was sparring with his swords against shadow clones he had created while perusing through the scrolls that were left behind. He had managed to dispel all of his clones but one and was looking around to locate the last one. He was exhausted and was sweating profusely, and with his vision started to get hazy which would explain why he didn't raise his sword to block a frontal attack from the last clone. The clone swiped down in a diagonal and a line of blood formed from Naruto before a gush of blood started to flow. Naruto fell to the ground in a heap, thinking he was going to die right then and there and he blacked out. In Naruto's mindscape, Naruto opened his eyes again and found himself surrounded by darkness. Where the hell am I and why is there so much water in here? Naruto indeed was knee-high in some murky water. He observed his surrounding and he noted a giant cage and when he looked closer, there was a piece of paper that said, "Seal." He moved closer to the cage and peered inside. He was greeted with the sight of a large sleeping fox and a small stream of what looked like red chakra moving from the fox and out of the cage. Naruto was confused at where he was and started to think of possible places, but couldn't come up with an answer. During his pondering, the fox had woken up and had situated itself right up against the bars of the cage looking down at Naruto. Naruto had felt a looming presence over him and when he turned around, he jumped back in a defensive stance. Well, it seems that my container hasn't been slacking in his training. Naruto looked at the fox suspiciously and asked, "Who are you and where are we, Fox-sama?" The fox was surprised at his manner and answered, "I am the 9-tailed fox, Kyubi no Yoko, and we are in your mind." Naruto almost panicked when he heard he was in front of perhaps the most powerful creature in the world but it did not explain why he was in his own mind. "Why am I in my own mind? I believe it was because of that wound you received a couple minutes ago. You blacked out and are now currently in front of me. As for wound, I have healed it but I have decided to leave a scar as a reminder to be more careful when you train." "Are you a male or female fox?" asked Naruto. "Because in all the textbooks I have read on you, they say you are male but I'm not sure as I look at you right now." Kyubi was thrown off by the bluntness of the question but decided to tell Naruto anyways. "Well, you are the first person that didn't automatically assume that I was a male because of all the power that I had in my arsenal. I am a female and damn proud of it too. But it's time for you to wake up now and we eventually talk again in the future." Kyubi then disappeared and Naruto felt himself being pulled out somewhere. Out in the real world. Naruto woke and rubbed his head. Damn, that was a odd dream. He scratched his chest and he felt a scar. He looked down that he had a scar that was healed but left a mark from his right shoulder to his left waist. He only looked in wonder seeing how fast he healed and mentally thanked Kyubi. Somewhere in her cage, Kyubi smiled at the thought. Flashback ends. Since that moment, Kyubi had made no effort to contact Naruto and no matter how hard Naruto tried, he couldn't reach Kyubi. But he had become more careful in his training to avoid any more serious accidents. He noticed that 3 minutes had passed and pounced on his ramen devouring in less than 30 seconds and prepared himself to go do training. After 2 hours of various types of training, He went back to his apartment to clean up and prepared to go to the academy to participate in the genin exams, the exam that would determine who would become genin, who would be held back, or dropped from the program. Naruto had ranked himself at the top of the class, but he never showed his skills at the academy and resorted to fighting and performing at a level much lower than what he was capable of. The results was his ranking was near the dead last of the academy, if not the dead last. He had received many taunts from Sasuke, who had blamed his loss to Naruto as luck and that there was no way the dead last could ever beat the Uchiha prodigy. Naruto put his mask back on and proceeded to the academy. He arrived in the room and observed who was already in the room. Shino Aburame, who was talking to a bug on his finger. Choji Akamichi, who was eating a bag of potato chips. Shikamaru Nara, who was sitting next to Choji with a bored expression. Hinata Hyuga, who was sitting nervously in her seat and trying to keep Kiba from putting his arm around her. Kiba Inuzuka and his dog Akamura, who was trying to put his arm around Hinata and asking her out on a date. And Sasuke Uchiha, who was brooding with a straight face. Naruto moved up the stairs and decided to sit next to Hinata. Kiba had noticed Naruto walking toward him and knew Naruto would try and sit down next to Hinata, so he stood up and blocked Naruto's path. Naruto looked at Kiba, who was in his way, with a lazy eye. "May I ask why you are blocking my path?" Kiba glared back at Naruto and said, "I know you want to sit next to Hinata, but that's too bad because I'm already sitting next to her." "Oh really? Well, I'm going to show you how I'm going to sit next to Hinata." By now the whole class had heard what was going on and was looking to see what would happen. "Oh yay, smart guy? Show it to me," Kiba replied arrogantly. Naruto smirked under his mask and knew his plan was already going to work, but made no visible sign to show his victory. "Alright then, Kiba, I want you to stay right here and don't move a single step." Kiba, being not too smart, accepted what Naruto told him. Naruto then walked past Kiba and sat down in the chair that was previously occupied by Kiba himself. He looked at an enraged Kiba and said, "And that is how you do it." Kiba became angry at Naruto and demanded that Naruto get out of his seat. "Why should I move? You wanted to prove that I could take the seat from you, and that's what I did. You don't deserve to sit next to Hinata. Only I care about her." "Oh really then? How much do you actually know about her? Do you know her favorite color? Favorite food?" Naruto asked. Looking at Kiba's blank face, he got his answer. "That's what I thought." Kiba sent Naruto a dark look and went to a seat several rows back, muttering under his breath. Hinata had whispered under her breath, "Thank you, Naruto." "It was no problem, Hinata," Naruto whispered back. At that moment, several loud shrieks were heard and everyone turned and faced the doorway into the classroom. There was a blockade of a girl with bright pink hair and a girl with blonde hair who both had tried to reach the coveted seat right next to Sasuke Uchiha. The girls' name were Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka, and both were the biggest fangirls of Sasuke and both rushed to the coveted seat next to him. Sakura had reached first and made a loud announcement with her victory over Ino. Naruto rolled his eyes in annoyance, but no other reaction to the girl's foolishness. Iruka-sensei had appeared in the room and gave a speech about becoming a genin and to wish them the best of luck on the test. He then explained that the test would take up two parts, a written exam and a ninjutsu exam that we observed by himself and another teacher. He passed out the test and everyone began to work. After about 15 minutes, Iruka started to patrol the room and see the progress of his students and was thoroughly shocked when Naruto had gotten up from his desk and placed his test on the table. The eyes of all the students followed and most instantly came up with the conclusion, given Naruto was one of the dumbest students in class, he had just given up. After about another hour, all the tests had been handed in and the students were given a 1-hour break before the next half of their exam, where the written exam results would be posted after on the door. Iruka sat down at his desk and proceeded to grade the tests. Most of the students had fulfilled what he had expected of them, with Sakura, Sasuke, Shino and Hinata being at the top of the class. What shocked Iruka was that Naruto had gotten a perfect score, beating out Sakura and Sasuke for the top score. The 1-hour break soon finished and all the students expectantly looked to see their grades. Everyone was shocked to see that Naruto had gotten the best score out of the entire class, and which Naruto acted neutral and sat down in his seat. The students sat down nervously, all trying to stay calm and hope to perform their jutsus correctly. One by one, students were called into the separate room and through the reactions after coming back, Everyone was able to figure if the person had failed or passed. Soon enough, Naruto was called, who happened to be the last person to take his test, and he walked into the room. He saw Iruka and Mizuki, who for some reason, Naruto did not trust. "Okay, Naruto. I want you to perform Kawamari, Henge and create 2 working bunchins." Iruka read off his list. Naruto nodded and formed a hand seal. Kawamari. A cloud of smoke erupted and he was replaced with a chair. He then formed another hand seal and yelled out, "Oryoke no Jutsu." Another plume of smoke covered Naruto, and when the smoke cleared, Iruka and Mizuki were met with a sight of a near-naked girl who was wearing a mask but had thin smoke wisps that barely covered her female parts. To say the least, Iruka and Mizuki were out for a good 10 minutes with blood leaking out of their nose. Too bad, when they had woken up, Naruto had gotten a very loud scream in his ear to never do it again or he would suffer the consequence. Iruka then calmed himself down and told Naruto to create 2 bunchins. Naruto did the hand seal and created 2 working bunchins. Iruka smiled widely at Naruto, handed him a Konoha Hitate and said, "Congratulations, Naruto. You have become a genin." Naruto bowed but asked, "Iruka-sensei, is it required that I have to wear my Hitate?" Iruka looked at him oddly. "Well, you have to wear it while you are doing missions outside the village, but the rules don't say you have to wear it all the time." Naruto bowed at Iruka. "Thank you, Iruka-sensei. You have taught me much over the 3 years as a student." And Naruto turned around, stowing his Hitate in one of his pockets, and left the room. Iruka smiled at Naruto and was proud. Mizuki, however, was not happy that his plan had failed that would allow him to get the Forbidden Scroll and also kill the demon brat at the same time. But he would not allow something get in the way of his plans of getting the ultimate power from Orochimaru. Outside the academy, Naruto was walking out of the academy when he saw glares and heard whispering directed in HS direction. He picked up small parts like, "Thank goodness they didn't let that demon become a ninja," and other remarks were whispered by the parents of 2 students who had graduated. Naruto threw them a glare and they immediately looked away, pretending not knowing what they were talking about. Cowards. When they think they are safe, but the instant danger comes along, they ran away and feign innocence nothing happened. Naruto was thinking of going to do some more training when he was approached by Hinata. "Did you pass, Naruto-kun?" Naruto gave her a smile that she could barely distinguish through the mask and a thumbs up. Hinata smiled back but asked, "Why aren't you wearing your Hitate?" "Bekasu, the less people that know I am a shinobi now, the better. It gives me an element of surprise if someone decides to attack me." At that moment, Hiyashi Hyuga had appeared to hear about the results of the exam and to pick up his daughter. "So, Hinata, did you pass?" Hinata nodded her head. "Good. It was expected of someone from the Hyuga to pass with any trouble." His then saw Naruto. "Any who may you be, boy? My name is Naruto Himura Uzumaki and it's nice to meet the father of Hinata." He bowed respectfully to Hiyashi. "May I please know your name?" Hiyashi was surprised to see someone so young with such manners. "My name is Hiyashi and it was nice to meet you, Naruto. And now if you would excuse me, I must escort my daughter home." And he turned around motioning for Hinata to follow him. Hinata said a silent goodbye and waved and Naruto did the same back. Naruto then walked back to his apartment to retrieve his equipment to resume his training. Later that night, Naruto was training in the forest when he heard movement. He decided to investigate and after running for a short distance, he saw Mizuki with a large scroll tied to his back and decided to see what it was. He pulled out a scroll that was designed the third for him and pulled out a bow and pulled back the string. An arrow that was sealed in a minute scroll on the bow appeared and Naruto took careful aim and shot his arrow. His arrow cut cleanly through the rope holding the scroll to Mizuki's back. Naruto dashed forward and snatched the scroll from the air and disappeared before Mizuki had even realized he no longer had the scroll. Mizuki, who had successfully stolen the Forbidden Scroll, which was pathetic ly easy, which involved taping a porno magazine in the Hokage's face and having him pass out from the blood loss. He grinned knowing he would escape with the scroll and be given power. He had ran for several minutes before he realized the scroll on his back was gone. He outwardly cursed and quickly turned around to locate the lost scroll. Naruto had managed to get a large distance away from Mizuki and was resting up against a tree, catching his breath. He let his eyes wander over the forbidden scroll and decided it was too much of a chance it let it pass by. He broke the seal holding the scroll together and started to peruse it. An hour later, Iruka was searching the forest for whoever could have possibly stolen the forbidden scroll when he glanced in a random direction and saw Naruto looking at the scroll. He silently snuck up and pulled out a kunai to be prepared for anything. He walked forward and saw Naruto reading the forbidden scroll. "Naruto, are you the one who stole the scroll?" Naruto looked up from his reading and said, "Does it look like I stole the scroll? If I had, I would have been long gone from by now. I had stopped the real person from getting away from the scroll and had decided to end this person knowing they would turn back to get the forbidden scroll back." "Just who is the person who stole the scroll?" Iruka inquired. "Why don't you ask him, seeing as he is about 30 seconds away from our position?" A haggard-looking Mizuki had finally located the forbidden scroll only to find it in the hands of the Kyuubi brat and Iruka. He pointed accusingly at Naruto and said, "Iruka, you have to help me. The Kyuubi brat stole the forbidden scroll and was about to escape when I had stopped him. He told me he was going to use the scroll to exact revenge on Konoha." Naruto's eyes had narrowed at that point and stood up. "You expect Iruka to believe those lies that are being spewed from your mouth? I'm going to fix that problem right now." He pulled out his training sword and pointed it at Mizuki. He stood in a defensive position, waiting to see what Mizuki would do first. Mizuki then ran in a full circle attempting to get around Naruto, but Naruto moved to cut him off and pulled back his arm to slice at Mizuki. Mizuki then pulled out a large amount of shuriken and kunai and threw them in Naruto's direction. Naruto instantly pulled out 2 kunai, one in each hand, to defend himself but saw the weapons were not aimed at him. He turned around and yelled, "Iruka-sensei, watch out." Iruka, who was in a daze at what was happening, shook himself awake and was barely able to block any of the weapons, thus results of cuts and weapons sticking on him. Mizuki, who saw Naruto was distracted, pulled up behind and with a kunai in hand started to drive it downward. Though Naruto had not sensed the attack, Iruka had seen it and made a hand seal. Naruto had felt an attack coming from behind but turned around to see Iruka had kicked him away, take a kunai to the right side of his chest, and it was starting to bleed. Mizuki cursed, "Iruka, why the hell do you defend the demon? He killed your parents and I know you hated the Kyuubi. So why do you defend such scum?" He looked at Naruto. "That's right, Naruto. You are the 9-tailed fox and you killed Iruka's parents, and despite him saying how good you are in class, it was all a charade. Bekasu deep down, he hates you, the Kyuubi." Naruto ignored the comment of being the Kyuubi, but the part of Iruka stung deep in his soul because he had trusted Iruka and made him a close person. But now, he didn't know what to do with Iruka. Iruka spoke in ragged gasps, "It may be true that I hate the Kyuubi." Naruto's eyes widened at that and was ready to run away, but Naruto is not the Kyuubi. He is a proud shinobi of Konoha and I'm proud to have called him my student. Save me the garbage, Iruka. You always were a soft shinobi. Now, I'm just going to kill you off, then Naruto, and take the forbidden scroll. Mizuki approached Iruka slowly and Iruka tired to move, but the wounds on his chest and legs prevented him from moving without losing more blood. Mizuki stopped in front of Iruka. "Now, die," and he brought his kunai down again to finish Iruka. Iruka closed his eyes and waited, fought the finishing blow, but it never came. He opened his eyes again and saw Naruto, covered in a red chakra, and if his eyes were fooling him, fox ears and a foxtail. Naruto a few moments back. He had seen Iruka take the kunai to his body and was moved to help but hesitated when Mizuki started talking. He almost ran away when Iruka started to talk but stopped when he heard Iruka's revelation. He stood rooted to the spot and closed his eyes. "Kyuubi, if you can hear me, I want you to give me power so I can protect Iruka." Somewhere in Naruto's mind, Kyuubi responded, "I will give you chakra, along with fox senses to help you. Use it wisely." Naruto felt a surge of chakra and his features became more fox-like and he grew fox ears and a foxtail. Time to pay, Mizuki, for hurting Iruka-sensei. Naruto had dashed forward and gave a vicious jumping kick to Mizuki's face, effectively knocking him to the ground. Mizuki looked up from his downed position and saw Naruto's chakra and new features. "So, it seems you have decided to reveal your true colors now. Come forward, so I can kill you and become a hero for this village." Naruto looked at his with eyes of disdain. Even when backed into a corner, you still spewed trash from your mouth. Mizuki laughed derivatively, ha, I'm a Chunin and you are just a genin. How do you expect to beat me? I would beat you in one punch. Naruto eyed narrowed, I'm glad you asked, Mizuki. This is how I'm going to beat you. He put his hands in the ram seal and said, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Mass Shadow Clones Technique. There a massive amount of smoke clouds and hundreds of red chakra Narutos filled the forest. Ready to receive you punishment, Mizuki? Mizuki could only shake in fear at what would happen. The original Naruto swept his hand forward and all the Narutos jumped forward with fists or clawed extended. After a very short beating, a bloodied and bruised Mizuki laid on the forest floor and Naruto rushed to Iruka to help with his wound. Iruka though had already stemmed the flow of blood and was walking shakily to Naruto and stumbled forward. Naruto caught him and said, Come on, Iruka-sensei, let's get you to the hospital. Iruka just nodded his head and allowed Naruto to help him. Before they left the clearing, Naruto grabbed a flare from one of Iruka's pockets and fired into the air, alerting the Shinboi who were still searching for the Forbidden Scroll to converge on the site. They met with the sight of an unsealed Forbidden Scroll and a disfigured traitor to Konoha. Naruto was kneeling down in front of the two swords that he had been given by Kenshin a while back. He kneeled in front, unable to choose which one he would wield. Suddenly, the room turned black and Naruto stood up in alarm at what was happening. The swords both started to give off an aura and Naruto turned his attention back to them. A voice rang out and said, Young shinobi and swordsman, two paths now lie before you. One lies in protecting others. One of the swords unsheathed itself and revealed it was a sakabato, and the other lies in killing. The second sword unsheathed itself and revealed that it was a katana. Which one do you choose? Naruto looked at both swords and thought what each sword represented. Naruto stepped forward and said, The path that I choose is my own. Naruto grasped both swords and there was a bright flash and Naruto closed his eyes. When Naruto thought it was safe to open his eyes, he was back in the apartment. He looked down and saw that the swords had now changed. They both had intricate designs engraved in each and Naruto wondered what they meant. He put both swords back in his respective sheaths and made a note to create a style that would effectively use both in combat. He put the katana and put the sakabato into a scroll for looked at himself in a mirror and decided to put on a different change of clothes. Luckily, yesterday before he had gone training, he had gone and bought a few new outfits and decided to wear one of them. He still had his mask but now it was combined with a sleeveless black shirt that stuck to Naruto's lean muscles. He wore a pair of black pants that had many pockets for various items. He also put on a pair of fingerless gloves, where he flexed his fingers to get the feeling right. He tied his hair back into a ponytail with a ribbon. He had gotten it from Kenshin when his hair had grown too long and it was getting in his face. He put several scrolls that contained his bow, his two swords and his flute in his pants pockets. Kyubi in his mind was admiring the changes and hoped her decision to help Naruto choose his path would be the right one. At the academy, many of the students were talking excitedly about finally becoming genin, while many of the girls in the class were fawning over Sasuke. The instant Naruto had stepped in the room, many of the fangirls somehow teleported and were now fawning over Naruto, who Kawamari himself with Kiba, who was about to sit down next to Hinata. Kiba looked hopeful in the group of girls but they broke away and Kiba walked to a different seat disgruntled. Hinata was looking at Naruto's new appearance and was blushing at the sight of Naruto's body. Iruka came in, with bandages covering his body. One of the genin questioned, Iruka, what is with all the bandages? Iruka smiled, it was nothing big. I just got in a fight from a Chunin traitor in our village. He was trying to steal a scroll from the Hokage but he was caught but he was able to get away. I had help in defeating him. One of the students asked who had helped him. Iruka pointed at someone in the classroom and all eyes turned to where he was pointing. All eyes were on Naruto and he looked like a deer in headlights. Oro? Huh? Many of the students were in awe that Naruto had defeated a Chunin but some were thinking that it wasn't true. Cough Kiba, Sasaki Kao. Before the class could question Naruto, Iruka started to name the teams. He went through the numbers and when Team 7, he said, Team 7 will consist of Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura had cheered at this and saying it was fate that Sasuke and her were on the same team. And Naruto Uzumaki. There was a loud thump and it was repeated and everyone saw that it was Naruto banging his head against the table. Naruto spoke, "May I have an explanation on why I am with Sasuke and Sakura, Iruka-sensei? Though it seems you passed the genin exams with the top score, the rest of your academics are the lowest of the class. So, therefore you were paired with Sakura and Sasuke." Naruto continued to bang his head against the table. Iruka decided to continue and said, "Your Junin-sensei will be Kakashi Hatake." Iruka looked down his list. Team 8 will consist of Shino Aburame. Shino took it with silence. Hinata Hyuga. Hinata was saddened by the thought that she couldn't be with Naruto, and Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba was plotting how to get Hinata to love him and not Naruto now that they would be separated. Your Junin-sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. Iruka looked down his list. Team 9 is still in circulation so we will ignore them. Team 10 will consist of Shikamaru Nara. Shikamaru took it with a bored expression on his face. Choji Akamichi? Choji continued to eat his potato chips with a passion, and Ino Yamanaka. She groaned and complained about being on a team with a lazy bum and a fat ass. Your Junin-sensei will be Asumaseru Tobi. You all have until about 1 to do anything you will like before your Junin-sensei comes. He closed the book that contained the list. Well, my job here is done as your teacher. I hope you all the best luck as shinobi of Konoha. He walked out of the room and the genin started to chat again. Naruto turned to Hinata and asked, "So, Hinata, would you like to go get something to go eat before your sensei comes to pick you up?" Hinata blushed but nodded her head. They both stood up and walked to the door but were blocked by Kiba with Akamaru in his jacket. "Why don't you eat with your own teammates, Naruto? Hinata is on my team now and I should be Tay-1 to take her out." Naruto looked at him with an aloof look before saying while pointing at a random spot, "Look, a piece of steak on the ground." Kiba turned to where Naruto pointed but realized he fell for the trap. By the time he turned back to face Naruto, Naruto was gone in a flash with Hinata in tow. Outside the academy, Naruto was walking with a passive expression on his face while Hinata was clutching her sides, breathing heavily. "Naruto, was it necessary to run away from Kiba at the academy? I figured it was the only way to shake off the flea-bitten dog so that's what I did." "So what would you like to eat, Hinata?" Hinata's face lit up and she spoke in a voice that wasn't her usual tone. It had taken on a more sensual tone. "Naruto-kun, could we please go get cinnamon buns?" Naruto was going to say no because her addiction to cinnamon buns had made Naruto very low on money on several occasions. He was about to say no when Hinata gave him the puppy dog look. Naruto tried to look away but found himself being pulled to look into Hinata's eyes. Naruto sighed in defeat and said, "Fine, you win. I'll go buy you cinnamon buns." Hinata jumped in joy and threw her fingers out in a V for victory. Several minutes later, Naruto was sadly looking at his empty wallet while Hinata had a large bag of cinnamon buns, which she was happily eating. Naruto put his wallet back in one of his pockets and followed beside Hinata. After a while, they sat down on a bench and Hinata finished the buns and was smiling after being satisfied. Naruto noticed the mess that was on Hinata's face and pulled out a napkin and stood in front of Hinata. "Hinata, you have a mess on your face. Let me help you clean up." Hinata was starting to blush at the close proximity of Naruto's face to her and the blush darkened when he started to touch her face with the napkin. Naruto finished cleaning her face and tossed the napkin into a wastebasket. Naruto motioned that they should go back to the academy and Hinata stood up and walked beside Naruto. They continued to walk when Naruto noticed that he had missed a spot while cleaning her face. He slowly slipped his mask down and licked the spot that he had missed. Hinata instantly froze and Naruto pulled back afraid that he had done something wrong. Hinata though just fainted on the spot and Naruto quickly caught her before she hit the ground. He put Hinata on his back and carried her piggyback style. Hinata snuggled into Naruto's back and Naruto blushed under his mask. She murmured, "Naruto-kun," and Naruto could only imagine what she was dreaming about. Naruto carried Hinata into the classroom which attracted attention of all the genin. Naruto just calmly walked down and took a seat next to Shino. Shino had no reaction but looked at Naruto. "Shino, I would like to ask a favor from you. I know that we barely talked with each other in the academy but I want you to do something for me." He motioned to the dozing Hinata. "Can watch her and keep Kiba away from making any unwanted advances on Hinata?" Shino continued to look at Naruto and gave a small nod. I'm sure out Junin-sensei will be able to control Kiba, Naruto. But if our sensei is unable to, I will step in. Naruto grabbed Shino's hand and shook it. You have my thanks, Shino. He went back to Hinata, who he had placed in a chair, and gently shook her awake. Hinata opened her eyes and she blushed as she thought of the moment that had made her faint. A Junin-sensei had came in and announced herself as Kurenai Yuhi and said the name of her team. A passive Shino and angry-looking Kiba walked to the front and Hinata made to go to the front, but Naruto held her back for a moment. Hinata, before you leave, let me tell you that you are my best friend and I would have never gotten through the academy without you there. No, go and be the best kunoichi that Konoha had ever seen. Hinata blushed again at the comment and went down to the front. Kurenai escorted them out of the room and Hinata gave a small wave to Naruto, which Naruto returned. Naruto sat down quietly at a desk and gazed out a window. Soon, Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto were the only ones left in the room and their sensei was already 2 hours late. Sakura was griping to no one in particular. Sasuke was still brooding and Naruto was now looking over several scrolls that he had copied from the Forbidden Scroll. The door to the classroom then opened and a man with silver hair, wearing a face mask and had his hetate covering one eye. 3 pairs of eyes looked at him and he asked, "You guys Team 7? There were silent looks that he perceived to be as a yes. Well, meet at the top of the academy rooftop in 5 minutes. He poofed away and the 3 genin followed using the stairs. On the rooftop of the academy, the 3 genin appeared on the rooftop and their sensei was leaning against the railing on the rooftop. They took a seat in front of him and he turned around. Well, now that we are all here, let's start with introductions. State your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies and your dream. Let's start with you, Pinky. Sakura's eyes flashed at the nickname but countered, why don't you start to show up how we are supposed to do it? Their sensei shrugged his shoulders and started. My name is Kakashi Hitaki. I have a lot of likes and dislikes. My hobbies are few and well my dream, you don't need to know. All 3 genin stared at him and all thought the same thing. We didn't learn anything about our sensei except for his name. Now once again, Pinky, you start. Sakura scowled at the name but started anyways. My name is Sakura Haruno. I like giggles and glances in Sasuke's direction and I dislike Ino Pig and Sasuke haters. I don't have any hobbies but my dream is to get married to someone. Glance at Sasuke again. Kakashi pointed at Sasuke. You next, Emo. Sasuke looked annoyed at the name. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. My likes are nothing. My dislikes are nothing you need to know. My hobby is training. My dream is not much of a dream but more of an ambition. I want to kill a certain man. Kakashi pointed at Naruto last. You last, copycat. Naruto just shrugged at the name. My name is Naruto Himura Uzumaki. My likes are my best friend, my guardian, hunting, music and swords. My dislikes are overly confident people, arrogant people who believe everyone is beneath them and people who try to date without knowing the person. My dream? I don't have a dream, other than to protect everyone who is precious to me. Kakashi looked over the group and thought, well, I have an emo Avenger, and fangirl of the Avenger and copycat that had a solid goal in life. This should be interesting. Now that introductions are done, I want everyone to meet me at Training Ground 7 at 6 o'clock for a survival test. I suggest not eating breakfast, you are going to puke it out. And he poofed away. Sasuke stood up and went down the stairs, and Sakura followed Sasuke like the fangirl she was. Naruto jumped off the rooftop and jumped from rooftop to rooftop thinking about what Hinata was doing. At a training ground, Hinata was pounding a log with her palms when she felt someone approach from behind. She whirled around and struck out and had her palm centimeters from Naruto's face. Naruto just stood there with a neutral expression. Well, it seems someone had been training hard. Hinata blushed from the comment but looked down at the ground. It's still not enough to beat my younger sister when we spar against each other though. My father thinks higher than her than of me and I don't know what to do. Every time we spar, I see my mother in her and I lack the will to attack. Tears started to form in her eyes as she let out her frustrations. Naruto walked up and tilted her face up. Now, Hinata, what happened to the girl I knew in the academy that would smile, no matter what happened to herself? Oh, stop it Naruto-kun. She faltered when she added the kun to Naruto's name. Naruto looked at her kindly and said, "Naruto-kun, huh? I like the sound of that." He went to the log and looked at it. "Poor log, never stood a chance against you, Hinata. How would you like to spar me, then?" "But, Naruto, we could hurt one another," said Hinata. "Hinata, you worry too much. But to motivate you, you will get a reward from me if you are able to land a single hit on me." Naruto grinned under his mask. Hinata could only wonder what the reward would be as she got into the Huggy Jukin stance. Naruto observed the stance and said, "I assume that you are in your family fighting style?" Hinata nodded and waited for Naruto to make the first move. It seems her family's style utilizes only the hands to do the attacking. I wonder if they would be able to use their feet to attack or even attack long range. I know Hinata has near-perfect chakra control, but how will that help her with her family style? Well, guess I'm about to find out. Naruto got into a basic fighting stance with both fists in front and legs spread apart. He dashed forward and threw a punch out. Hinata blocked with her right forearm before pulling her left arm back and striking Naruto's chest. Naruto, however, grabbed her arm and threw her air where she landed gracefully several feet away. "Come on now, Hinata. Is that the best you can muster together? I thought you were better than our little spar 3 years ago at the academy." A tick mark had appeared on Hinata's head and she activated her Byakugan. "Oh boy, I think I'm in trouble now." Kyuubi chuckled in his mind. That is what you get for pissing off a girl, especially one that can kick your butt. Hinata had dashed forward and started to let off a flurry of strikes that Naruto could only barely dodge. He felt the chakra coming from Hinata's hands when they flew by his body and he could only start to sweat by all the close calls. Hinata, however, was starting to be annoyed, got into a stance that she had seen had father used while training. Hake Rokujuin Sho. 8 divination signs, 64 palms of the hand. Naruto was quickly under attack and he was now being forced to block with his hands. He was unable to block with all of the attacks and he felt his tenketsu points being closed. Hinata, though, after the attack had collapsed due to chakra exhaustion and lay down on the ground. "Damn, that attack hurts like hell. But it seems that it's only temporary. And it seems that I have to keep my promise because she did manage to land a hit on me." Naruto pulled out a camera and pulled down his mask. He kneeled beside the sleeping Hinata and pointed in at himself and Hinata and took a picture. He also pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down some advice for Hinata to make her fighting even stronger. He laid both down on top of Hinata and disappeared in a whirl of leaves. Hinata woke up several minutes later with and saw 2 items on top of her. She looked at the first and saw it was advice. It read, "Hinata, here is what I think you can do to make your fighting stronger. First, incorporate kicks and grabs in your moves. It will make it easier for you to be able to hit your opponent and possible disabled tenketsu points if you can fine-tune your chakra control. Second, think about inventing or learning long-range moves if you ever fight someone who is a long-range specialist. Third, you are fighting very stiffly. You need to use your natural flexibility and use it to its fullest potential. Lastly, build up your chakra reserve by working out and doing chakra exercises. You can find them easily in the library." From Naruto. She read it several times to memorize and put it in a special pocket in her jacket. She looked at a second item, which was the picture with her and Naruto. She made to put it away but then did a double take and saw that Naruto had pulled his mask down. She unconsciously drooled at the picture and thought Naruto had such a wise smile and face. She made a promise to herself that she would see Naruto without his mask. The next day, Naruto woke up around 5:30 and prepared for the survival test. He put all his items in his pockets and made himself a breakfast. As if I'm going to go to a survival test without eating. Without eating, how the heck am I going to survive? And beside, seeing how late our sensei was yesterday, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't come until noon. When he had finished his breakfast, he looked at a clock and it read, walked out of his apartment and made his way to the training ground 7. When he arrived, he saw both Sakura and Sasuke were already there, but both looked as if they had not eaten anything. Naruto sat down behind one of the training posts and pulled out a scroll again and started to study its content. Sakura got curious about what Naruto was reading and tried to read over Naruto's shoulder. Naruto closed the scroll and looked at Sakura. "You know, Sakura, it's rude to read over someone's shoulder." Sakura backed away, acting if she hadn't done anything wrong. This continued for about 2 more hours with Naruto studying, Sakura trying to find ways to entertain herself and Sasuke continuing to be a brooding emo. When Kakashi had finally arrived, Sakura screeched that he was late. "Well, I got lost on the road of life and—" "Liar," yelled Sakura. "Aside from that, let's get this survival test on the road. But first, did any of you eat breakfast?" Sasuke and Sakura shook their head but Naruto gave no response. "Well, it seems one of you were thinking like a ninja and decided to eat anyways. Good job, Naruto, for seeing past my first trap." Sakura and Sasuke look infuriated that they could have eaten but they didn't. "Today's test will be retrieving these 2 bells from me." Sakura questioned, "Why are there only 2 bells though?" "Good question, Sakura. The reason is only 2 of you will be moving on to become genin and 1 will be sent back to the academy." 2 faces registered shock while another one eyes narrowed. That person started to see through the trap. "The 1 person who does not get a bell from me will be sent back to the academy. You 3 have until noon to get the bells from me. The one who doesn't get a bell will be tied to a stump and be forced to watch to the other 2 eat these." He pulled out 2 bento boxes and an alarm clock and put it on a training stump. "You better come at me with the intent to kill or you won't get a bell. The test starts now." Sasuke and Sakura instantly darted away and went to find a hiding spot. Naruto, however, stood still and waited to see what Kakashi would do. Kakashi pulled out a small orange book and Naruto's eyes narrowed. "So, Kakashi-sensei, do you plan to take us genin seriously?" Kakashi looked up from his reading and replied, "Why should I?" Naruto glared back and said, "That was the answer I was looking for." He made a hand sign and a large amount of leaves obscured Naruto. A few seconds later, the leaves dispersed and Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Kakashi got looked on lazily and passed it off as nothing big. After about 15 minutes, Kakashi started to try and sense where his students were. He was able to sense Sasuke, who was about 50 meters away in a tree, and Sakura, who was hiding under a bush about the same distance, but he could not get a solid hold on Naruto's chakra. It seemed that Naruto's chakra was all around him and he could not figure out why. Suddenly, an arrow came flying out and was headed for Kakashi. He lazily pulled out a kunai and blocked the arrow, and as soon as he did that, 2 more arrows came from 2 different directions and the process kept going until Kakashi was being forced to put his book away and start to dodge. Kakashi was now thinking who was firing the arrows and he immediately removed Sakura and Sasuke because they had not yet moved from their hiding positions and came up with Naruto. But what baffled Kakashi was why Naruto was even using arrows as a weapon, and he had gotten such a precise aim, but couldn't process that thought, so he decided to go into the forest for cover and search out the other 2 genin. Naruto walked out into the clearing after Kakashi had gone and picked 2 bells off the ground. Kakashi had not noticed the bells had been cut off by an arrow. Naruto picked them up and set out to find his 2 teammates before Kakashi did. With Sakura, she was bewildered when she had seen arrows being fired by someone and instantly thought it was Sasuke. She made to move and had not realized Kakashi was right behind her. She heard a boo and turned around and was caught in a genjutsu immediately. Sakura soon let out a scream before and fell to the forest floor with foam forming at her mouth. Kakashi just wondered if he had gone overboard with his genjutsu but shrugged it off. Now, time to find Sasuke. With Sasuke, he was jumping through the trees in the forest trying to figure a way that he would be able to get a bell from Kakashi when he landed in a clearing. He had felt a presence a few seconds before but he could not sense anyone around. He heard a rumbling underneath him and he suddenly found himself head deep in the ground. Kakashi appeared before him and taunted, "Well, it seems the great Sasuke isn't all what he says he is." Kakashi patted the area where the bells were. His face suddenly changed as he started to search for the bells. He dashed away, retracing his steps hoping to find the bells. Sasuke just wondered what else could go wrong when Naruto appeared in front of him, wielding a bow and 2 bells hanging off of it. "Looks like you could use some help, Sasuke." Sasuke looked shocked that Naruto had even gotten a bell and quickly thought of a plan. "Yay, Naruto. Could you please help me?" Naruto walked over and grabbed the scruff of Sasuke's shirt and pulled. Sasuke easily came out of the ground and Sasuke instantly darted toward Naruto's bow and stole a bell before darting off. Naruto looked at Sasuke's retreating back and thought, and I was going to give the bell to him. Time to go find Sakura. Naruto had found Sakura on the forest floor still passed out. He pulled out some smelling salts and passed it under her nose. Sakura instantly reacted and sat straight up. She looked at Naruto and he held out a bell out in front of her. She took the bell but asked, "Why are you giving this to me? Shouldn't you keep it for yourself?" Naruto shrugged and told her, "I should keep for myself, but that wouldn't help the team now, would it?" Sakura was about to answer when she realized the true point of the test. "It seems you understand now, Sakura. The two bells were just a distraction for us to work together. Bekaseu, do you expect us to take down a Junin by ourselves? The arrows that I had fired was a distraction I hope either of you two would use to attack Kakashi, and it was only by luck that I had managed to hit the string holding the bells to Kakashi's belt." The alarm clock sounded off in the distance and Naruto motioned to Sakura to follow. "We may still be able to pass this test if we come together." Meanwhile with Kakashi. Kakashi was finishing tying up Sasuke while yelling his head off to be let go and that he didn't deserve to be tied to the training log. Kakashi then felt Naruto and Sakura slowly approaching and Sakura had a bell in her hand. Kakashi waited until both had arrived at where he was standing before he started his questioning. "Sakura, where did you get that bell from?" She looked nervous under Kakashi's gaze but she said, "I got mine from Naruto." Kakashi asked another question, "Did you get it from him willingly?" Sakura nodded. Kakashi looked down at Sasuke who was still struggling against his bonds. "That is the reason why you are tied up and Sakura or Naruto is not. You stole something that Naruto had claimed, even though it was by chance. It seems that he was going to give a bell to you and Sakura but you acted too hastily and did allow Naruto the cons. You seek the short way out by stealing something of your teammates. Actions like that can be deadly in the ninja world." Kakashi walked over to a stone that was in the middle of the field. "Here on this stones are the names of heroes of Konoha. The names of many of my closest friends are on this stone." Sakura asked, "How are these people heroes?" Kakashi looked down at the stone. "These people are Kia." 3 pairs of eyes softened and looked away from each other. "Remember this, people who do not follow the rules are trash, but people who abandon their own comrades are worse than trash." He cut Sasuke loose from the training stump and told him, "I hope this shows that your teammates are more than willing to help you, Sasuke." Kakashi's face then lit up. "Well, starting tomorrow, Team 7 will officially start missions." He gave a thumbs up which all 3 genin returned. The next several months went smoothly for Naruto training and creating a style that would utilize both of his swords. Often, Hinata would join in his training in which Hinata would practice her own style of Jukin while practicing her clan's style. One thing that Naruto hated this entire time was the missions he was forced to do. Each missions he would be forced to work alone on the missions and most of the time it was done with glares and muttering behind his back. Rarely would there be a client that would appreciate his work and thanked him with a smile. As for the rest of his team, Sasuke, despite his humbling lesson during the genin survival test, had taken back his arrogant attitude and claimed that he was above doing D-ranked missions. Sakura had followed Sasuke's example and stated if her precious Sasuke-kun wasn't doing missions then she didn't have to. Kakashi just kept his head in his porn novels and barely paid attention to what his genin did. So following a mission involving a certain cat, Team 7 was reporting the results of a successful mission and watched the cat being hugged to death by its hefty owner. Sarutobi sat at the desk and shifted through several papers. "Well done, Team 7. You have another D-ranked mission recorded. I have several more D-ranked missions here, if you would like to do them. There is a painting a fence, babysitting the Taro's children and weeding a garden." Sasuke stepped forward and said, "I demand that we get a C-ranked mission now. I am tired of all these stupid jobs." Naruto glared at Sasuke. What is he talking about? He never helps in doing any of the jobs anyways, which reminds me that I should talk to Oji-sama about that. But a C-ranked mission does sound good right now. Naruto kept an impassive face on the outside just thinking about what could happen. Sarutobi just sat at his desk, eyeing each member of the team and decided to give them a C-ranked mission. Sarutobi pulled out a file from a stack of paper. "I will give you an escort mission. Your client will be a bridge builder from the land of the waves named Tazuna. He should be outside the door." Sarutobi raised his voice and said, "You can come in now." A man came in, with a bottle in hand, and he was clearly drunk by the way he smelled and how he was standing. Tazuna looked down at the team and said, "So, I get an emo-looking boy, a skinny girl, a silver-haired cyclops and a blonde brat as my protection? What kind of joke is this?" He was about to take another swig from his bottle when it fell cleanly in half, spilling its contents all over the floor. All looked at Naruto, who had summoned out his katana and sliced the bottle in half before anyone was able to see. His eyes showed anger and a killing intent was being directed at Tazuna. "I suggest you watch your tongue then next time you decide to insult the people that you have hired to protect you." Tazuna just mutely nodded his head and bowed his way out of the room. Naruto put his katana back into his scroll and crossed his arms across his chest, eyes narrowed. Sarutobi sighed and said, "Naruto, I know the client had insulted you and your team, but please refrain from attacking our clients." "Well, that is all. You are free until tomorrow morning when you are to escort Tazuna back home." Team 7 dispersed from the room. Sasuke, off to go brood. Sakura, to go follow Sasuke like a true fangirl. Kakashi, to go read his orange book in private. And Naruto to go get supplies and train. Naruto's apartment. Naruto was currently in his mind and was speaking with Kyuubi. Naruto had made the mindscape much more pleasant and was sitting in a field. Kyuubi had taken a form of a small girl with fox ears and tail and was running around, enjoying her new cage. "So, Kyuubi, I have been training with my swords for a long time now and I have noticed the seals engraved on the swords. What exactly do they do?" Kyuubi had stopped running around and settled down. "The seals that I have put into the swords will unlock special powers that are locked inside. But I don't know how to unlock them and they will only react when you are faced with a certain situation. Only then will you have access to their powers. On another note, would it be possible for me to get a real body?" Naruto's eyes bugged out for a second. Is that even possible? Why not? If mere people are able to seal demons into items and humans, why would it not be possible to create a body and seal me into it? Naruto thought for a moment. "I see. But where or how would we be able to create a body that would be able to sustain your chakra, Kyuubi? I'm not sure as of the moment, but I will think of something. In the meantime, you should get ready for tomorrow. But before you leave, I am going to give you 2 more things that are going to make you stronger. One is chakra weights that I will regulate as you become stronger and you get more chakra. The other will be a summoning. You may not be aware, but foxes are able to be summoned, but we are a very proud and picky race. We will not allow just anyone to be able to summon us, but seeing as I have been sealed in you and you have qualities that many people lack in this world that foxes respect, I will imprint the marks on your arm and they will come if you summon them. But be mindful they may not listen to you at first as they are extremely wary of humans. You must gain their trust and in return they will serve you with utmost loyalty. Now, get out of here. I will see you later when I'm able to find out more about getting me a body." Naruto snapped out of his mind and stretched his muscles, which were usually heavy when he saw rings of chakra surrounding his wrists and his ankles. He slowly went around his apartment, looking for all his supplies he would need tomorrow and hoping that he would be able to move normally tomorrow. The next morning, Naruto woke up early and put all his supplies in a small backpack and stretched carefully and found that his body had already adjusted to weights on his body. He walked out of his apartment and proceeded to the Hyuga manor where he was going to tell Hinata what his mission was. He arrived at the gate to the manor and was faced with the 2 guards. "Excuse me, but can I have permission to go inside the Hyuga compound?" Both guards glared at him. "We are not going to allow someone like you inside our compound. Now, be gone before we are forced to send you away by force." Naruto looked at them and asked, "All right, then. Could you deliver a message for me then?" The guards lashed out this time. "Did we tell you to leave, scum?" They dashed forward, preparing to strike Naruto. A voice called out, "What is the meaning of this? Why are you attacking a civilian?" Both guards and Naruto turned toward the voice and it was Hiyashi. Both guards quickly stopped and bowed to Hiyashi. They pointed at Naruto and said, "This boy here was demanding entrance into the compound and when he denied him, he became defiant and attempted to force his way through and we prepared to repel him when you came Hiyashi-sama." Hiyashi looked at his guards with a calculating look and looked at Naruto. "I see. If what you say is true, I would send Naruto away instantly. But his demeanor and posture does not hint toward anything you have said. Naruto, let me hear what you have to say." Naruto looked at the two guards and started talking. I had come wanting to leave a message for someone, and I had asked for permission to enter but they denied me. I resigned myself to allowing them to relay my message but they got angry and decided to strike first. Hiyashi watched Naruto while he spoke and he had detected no lie in what Naruto said. He looked at the two guards and glared at them. Expect to be punished. You denied admission to someone who asked respectfully and had no ill will toward us. Hiyashi puts his hands into a seal to punish the guards but stopped when Naruto stepped in front of them. There is not reason to punish, Hiyashi. They were just performing their duties and had perceived me as a threat. But, I feel no anger toward for their actions. So, please don't punish them. Hiyashi looked at Naruto. Very well then. I will not punish them on your request. But I ask, what is your purpose here today, Naruto? I was wishing to leave a message with Hinata. Can I trust that she will get the message? Hiyashi gave him a curt nod. I wish to tell Hinata that I am going on an escort mission to the land of the waves. I won't be in the village for a while so she should continue her training without me. Hiyashi frowned at what Naruto said. What is this training that you are talking about? Hinata and I train regularly after our missions and we help each other in our techniques. What we actually do, I will have to keep a secret. He bowed at Hiyashi and the two guards and headed toward the village gates. Hiyashi looked at the disappearing back of Naruto and wondered if he was the reason Hinata had more confidence and much stronger. He was still deep in thought when Hinata had come out to the front to see why her father was taking so long to meet her so they could train before she met her team for training. Father, is something wrong? Hiyashi snapped out of his thoughts and turned to Hinata. Nothing is wrong, Hinata. Now, let's go train. At village gate, Sakura and Sasuke were already waiting at the gate, with Sakura pestering Sasuke to go out on a date with her while Sasuke tried his best to not bash something in. Naruto arrived and Sakura screeched that he was late but Naruto just pointed out since Kakashi was not present, he was early. Kakashi, as if on cue, showed up with Tazuna in tow and they immediately started to set out. They started out and they had set up a good pace. The group traveled and they passed by two puddles, which both Kakashi and Naruto had noted but did not act. The group passed by the puddles and two figures silently came out of them. They hooked their claws together with a long metal chain and silently dashed forward, wrapping their chain around Kakashi. All three genin turned around in time to see their sensei ripped to shreds. Both assailants laughed creepily and said, "One down." They dashed forward ignoring the genin to kill their targets. They were about to wrap their chain around their target when they jumped back barely avoiding being decapitated. Naruto had pulled both swords and had his katana down at his side while his sakabato was crossed in front of him. Naruto had a dangerous look in his eyes. Now stand down before I am forced to hurt you. The assailants just laughed and charged Naruto. Naruto pulled his swords back preparing to strike when Sasuke jumped in front of Naruto, attempting to steal the glory that should have been rightfully his. Sasuke, being the arrogant idiot he was, had not judged the distance correctly and the assailants were too close for him to do anything. Naruto cursed Sasuke and quickly moved forward, shoving Sasuke out of the way. Naruto barely blocked the claws in time and received two gashes on the back of his hands. Naruto struggled to push up but was pinned down by the weight of both attackers bearing down on him. Kakashi suddenly appeared and pushed the head of both attackers together, effectively knocking them out. "Kakashi-sensei, you're okay," said Sakura, who was standing in the same spot the entire time the small skirmish was happening, not bothering to help out in the fight. Sasuke, who had been knocked to the side, had gotten and was pissed off. "Dobi, why the hell did you knock me off to the side? I was going to take them down myself." Kakashi intervened in the situation. "Sasuke, as you said, you jumped in to attack but what you failed to notice was the distance between you and the attackers and you had no room to be able to prepare to attack so Naruto pushed you out of the way so that you wouldn't be impaled so he actually saved your life." Sasuke looked shocked and looked at Naruto, who looked at him sheepishly. But to more pressing matters. He turned toward Tazuna and looked at him. "Tazuna-sama, in your mission request, it said you were asking for protection from bandits and thieves. As you saw, we were just attacked by two ninja, who just happened to be the demon brothers of the mist, who are Chunin-level shinobi. Now, I'm only going to ask once, why did you lie about the mission?" Tazuna looked up in a defeated way. In my country, we are currently being oppressed by a businessman named Gato. He is a corrupt man who is only looking out for himself and his money. He has blockaded all of our ports and we have no means to trade and bring money in. When I build this bridge, it will connect our island to the mainland, which would allow us to trade. But without the proper funds at hand to ask for more protection, we gathered up all the money we could and AC ranked mission was the best we got. Kakashi motioned his 3 genin towards to have a group discussion. As you can see, this mission is obviously much more complicated than we thought. I'm pushing this mission up to a high B rank. We are most likely going to be facing more opposition as we get closer to Wave Country. I'm going to ask you guys if you want to move forward. Sasuke immediately put his opinion forward as he wanted the challenge of wanting to complete a higher mission, and Sakura just tagged along with Sasuke. All eyes turned on Naruto, who was still thinking when he nodded his head. Kakashi was about to stand up and tell Tazuna they would continue the mission when he heard Naruto say, under one condition. What condition would that be, Naruto? Kakashi asked. That we wait for backup to arrive. As powerful as we are, we don't know what else we are going to face next, so I think we should have another team assist us. Kakashi thought for a moment. Good idea, Naruto. I will write a message to tell him of our problem and where to send the team to meet us. Actually, do you mind if I do it? I've been testing some new jutsu and I want to use them. He walked off into the nearby forest and made sure that no one was nearby to see him doing a summon. He bit his finger and spread his blood across a scroll that Kyuubi had instructed him to make to be able to summon. He slammed his hand down on the scroll. Kachiyose no Jutsu. A large plume of smoke appeared and Naruto looked hastily around to make sure no one had seen the smoke. Out of the smoke came a fox that had coughed a bit before looking up at Naruto. The fox stood at about 3 feet when sitting straight up. It had red fur with black at the tips of his ears and tail. The fox eyes Naruto suspiciously and asked, "Human, were you the one that summoned me?" Naruto bowed respectfully and nodded. I see, you are the first person to ever be able to summon as foxes, but I want to know how you did it because there is no written record or a summoning scroll written. It is because I have Kyuubi, the 9-tailed fox, sealed within me. The fox's eyes instantly narrowed and growled. You lie, human. There is no way the greatest fox to walk the demon, summon, and mortal realm can be sealed within a measly boy. Naruto's body then slumped and a spirit form of Kyuubi appeared from Naruto and it showed itself to the fox. The fox gasped in surprise but quickly bowed his head in respect. Is this enough proof that I have been sealed into this boy? The fox nodded his head and bowed again to Kyuubi. Good, then I expect all of our kind to listen and obey this boy as he has inherited my chakra and abilities. May one day, I will be able to meet you again. She returned back into her cage back in Naruto's mind and Naruto jolted awake, rubbing his head. It seems you were talking the truth, young one. I hope you accept my deepest apologies in disrespecting you, said the fox. Don't worry about it, though I do have a favor for you. Could you possibly be able to deliver a message for me? It needs to go back to Konoha and to the Hokage as quickly as possible and to be brought back with a response, who I am sure will not harm you. Be careful to avoid being seen because I'm pretty sure fox is a bad thing in Konoha. The fox gave what Naruto saw as a salute and quickly disappeared into the brush in the direction of Konoha. Naruto walked back, confident his message would come back soon. Naruto walked out of the forest and saw they were setting up camp. Kakashi saw this and told him to go collect some firewood for the night. They finished setting up camp and proceeded to have dinner that was cooked by Naruto, which surprised everyone to how good it tasted. They all went into their respective tents and fell asleep. The next morning, Naruto woke up to a scratching against his tent and he went to go see what scratching was. He opened his tent and it was the fox he had summoned the day before and it had a scroll tied around its neck. He took the scroll and gave him a piece of meat that had been left over from dinner last night. The fox snapped up the meat and gave a quick bow to return to the summoned demon world to spread the news of a new summoner. Naruto sat back inside his tent and opened the scroll and read it. It said that backup would arrive by the time the message would get back to Naruto. And as if on cue, Team 8 appeared at the camp and looked around to see if any of Team 7 was awake. They were coming home from a patrolling mission when they had received a message to go back up Team 7 on a mission. They immediately changed their direction and headed out. Naruto walked out of his tent to greet Team 7 but had forgotten to put on a shirt and was only wearing his mask and a pair of shorts. "Hello, you guys. I assume that you guys are our backup for our mission." Team 8 made no response and Naruto looked at them curiously. Hinata was looking away with a major blush on her face and she was covering her face. Shino looked impassive as he always did and Kiba was growling in distaste as he saw Hinata blush as she looked at Naruto's body, with Akamaru sleeping in his jacket. Kurenai just looked at Naruto with an odd look, wondering where he had gotten such a large scar from. Naruto followed their gazes and looked at himself and saw that he was only wearing a pair of shorts and he gave a shout and quickly darted back inside to put on more clothes. Hinata was hiding a nosebleed that she had received when she saw Naruto's body and thought, Naruto-kun's body is so wide. I wish I could just go up to him and, her thoughts went too far and Hinata promptly fainted, which Shino caught her before she hit the ground. The entire camp woke up to Naruto's scream, which resulted in a screaming Sakura, yelling that people should be quiet in the morning. Soon after, both teams and Tazuna were eating breakfast and Kakashi was explaining the situation to Kurenai and what they would be doing. Soon after, both teams set out with Kakashi and Kurenai taking the rear and the rest of the genin talking with each other. Naruto with Hinata, Sakura fawning over Sasuke, and Kiba trying to listen to what Hinata and Naruto were talking about with Shino nearby to stop anything drastic. They soon came to a water edge where a single boat was waiting for them. The boat owner noticed the number and said, "I'm sorry but I can only hold a maximum of 6 people in this boat. 3 of you will have to wait until I come back to pick you up." Kakashi gave a creepy eye smile from behind his small orange book. "Don't worry, we will be able to handle it. 3 of us can wait here." "Wait, you and Kurenai-sensei can both walk on water, can't you? Why don't you walk across the water?" Naruto asked. "Good point, Naruto. But that would still leave one person here waiting on this side," stated Kurenai. "There is no need to worry. Because I too can walk on water." He jumped out onto the water and all the ninja present except for Hinata expected him to sink into the water but he stayed on top. "Well, that solves that problem." Kakashi pushed all the genin except for Naruto into the boat, along with Tazuna and told the boat owner to start going. The boat owner started and Naruto, Kakashi and Kurenai followed beside the boat. They landed on the other shore and Tazuna said they would be able to reach his house in a short while after passing through the forest. The group continued to travel in a relaxed mood when Naruto suddenly threw a kunai into the brush on the side of the road. The group tensed and Naruto went forward to get his kunai. He came back with his kunai back in his hand but also was carrying a shivering rabbit by its ears. "Naruto, you baka. Why in the world did you have to go scare this poor rabbit?" Sakura said as she went to go get the rabbit from Naruto, but the instant she touched it, the rabbit bit her and attempt to run away only to run into Hinata's leg. Hinata picked up the rabbit and calmed it down, where it snuggled into her arms. Kiba laughed openly at Naruto. "You are such a stupid idiot, Naruto. You thought a rabbit would be a threat to us." Naruto sent Kiba a sharp glare before throwing a piece of fabric into Kiba's face. Kiba was grabbed at his face to remove the piece of fabric from his face and made to yell at Naruto when he was cut off. Naruto spoke in a low and deadly voice. "That came off of my kunai when I had thrown it into the brush. That means I had hit someone before they substituted themselves with this rabbit." Naruto's eyes continued to dart around looking for anything suspicious. He looked behind the group and his eyes flashed. Everyone hit the ground. Naruto grabbed Kiba. Kakashi pulled Tazuna and Sasuke down. And Kurenai pulled Hinata and Shino down. Sakura however was unaware of the situation and turned around to see a large sword flying through the air at her. Her eyes narrowed and she stood frozen in spot. Naruto saw this and quickly moved off the ground and dashed towards Sakura with inhuman speed. He jumped forward and tackled Sakura to the ground but not before receiving a large slash on his back due to the sword. Naruto fell to the ground in a heap and didn't move. The sword continued to fly until it hit a tree and a figure appeared on top of it. A man wearing a pair of camo pants and bandages around his face, looked down at his target and his bodyguards. "This is the bodyguards that you got to protect yourself with, Tazuna? All the genin, form a ring around Tazuna and protect him. Kurenai, go check on Naruto and patch up his wounds. I'll deal with enemy." All said genin jumped around Tazuna, with their various weapons and clan jutsus on standby. Kurenai rushed to Naruto, who was still face down on the ground. She went closer to inspect his large wound on his back but saw that it was already healing itself at an accelerated pace, but a scar was being left behind. Naruto slowly woke up and picked himself up off the ground. He used his hands and felt the scar in his back. Dang it, and I just bought this shirt too. Kurenai just looked bewildered. How in the world did he heal himself so fast? It is because of the nine-tailed fox? No time for that now, I have to go help Kakashi. She moved quickly to Kakashi and was standing shoulder to shoulder with him in a battle stance. Let me introduce myself. I am Zabuza, demon of the bloody mist. I was hired to kill that old man behind you and no one is going to stop me. But it seems that you two think can. Copycat Kakashi and Genjutsu Mistress Kurenai. I will remove from this world and you won't be able to see a thing. Kirigakure no Jutsu. Hidden mist technique. A thick mist rolled out of nowhere and surrounded the two Junin and the Genin, making them unable to see properly. Kakashi revealed his Sharingan and attempted to look through the mist with his eye but to no avail. Zabuza's voice pet out from the mist in a creepy and menacing voice. 8 targets on the human body: throat, spinal column, lungs, liver, the jugular vein, the subclavian artery, kidney, heart. So many choices, what is a person to do? The Genin started to freeze up from the fear of Zabuza's voice, but Naruto spoke out. Do not give in to his mind games. He is trying to make us give up without giving a fight. If we are to die here today, then we fight and we will die proud shinobi of Konoha. All Genin looked at him with confident eyes. And besides, our Junin-sensei wouldn't allow us to be killed first without putting up a fight first. Kakashi and Kurenai had both heard Naruto's speech and couldn't help but be inspired by what he said. But Zabuza had other thoughts. The blonde one is annoying. He managed to actually put a spine in these Konoha wimps. I had to kill him first. He silently moved toward Naruto. Kakashi and Kurenai were trying to sense where Zabuza would strike and one thought flashed through their minds simultaneously. Tazuna. They instantly rushed to Tazuna's position right when Zabuza had appeared in front of Naruto and was swinging his sword down onto Naruto. Naruto, was all Kakashi could say before Naruto was cleaved in two right before his very eyes. The Genin had scattered by the time Zabuza had finished his attack but could not feel a terrible feeling wash over them. The Junin had frozen on spot and Zabuza took the time to knock them both into the lake nearby. They both came up, coughing up water, and the water around them began to grow heavy. Zabuza appeared in between them and with a water clone. Suiru no Jutsu. Water prison technique. A sphere of water surrounded both Kakashi and Kurenai and both were held inside by Zabuza and his water clone. And to think I would have a hard time fighting the famed Copcat and Genjutsu Mistress. And now to finish my job. He summoned several Mizu Bunchins and made them go after Tazuna. The Bunchins charged forward to attack, swords held high, but they were soon dispersed by arrows that had struck each Bunchin in the forehead. All ninja looked at the direction of where the arrows came from and saw Naruto holding his bow. He put his bow back into its scroll and summoned out his Sakabato out its scroll. His eyes changed, had become much sharper than normal, and their color had become much darker than from his normal bright blue. He placed it firmly on his hip and was placed his right hand on the handle, prepared to draw and started to walk towards Zabuza. Zabuza did some one-handed signs and more Mizu Bunchins were created. One charged Naruto and was quickly dispatched by a slash that was faster than anyone had seen before. Naruto moved forward with inhuman speed and all the water clones soon fell back into puddles on the ground. He stopped at the edge of the bank and looked at Zabuza. Release my sensei and Kurenai and I will let you leave in one piece. If not, you will face the consequences. Ha ha, like a Genin could take me down. I am Zabuza of the Bloody Mist. Would you like to know why mist used to be called the Bloody Mist? Naruto just glared at Zabuza while the other Genin looked interested. It started back in the day before the council changed the rules. In the academy, when you trained to be shinobi, you were given a partner. You did everything with that partner. You ate together, you trained together and even shared the same bed. On the day of the graduation, you were given one task: to kill the one you had been partnered with for the last 3 years. Imagine two people that lived together and had grown close having to kill to survive. Unfortunately, that rule had to be changed after 1 year. Sakura was ignorant enough to ask, despite feeling chilled travel down her spine. Why did they change the rule? Zabuza let out a cruel laugh. I'm glad you asked. One year, there were over 100 students, but they were all slaughtered by one child who wasn't even a ninja yet. Guess who that boy was? He paused for a second. That was me. All the genin eyes widened in fear while Naruto just closed his eyes. That's right. Fear me. You genin don't have chance against me, and I will finish off your senseis and I will come and hunt you all down. All the genin made to run with Tazuna in two, but Naruto stopped them. Where are you guys going, especially you Sakura and Sasuke? I thought Kakashi told us that shinobi that break the rules are trash, but people who are abandoning their comrades are worse than trash. All genin stopped in their tracks and looked at Naruto. Kakashi would have given Naruto a thumbs up if he wasn't trapped in the water sphere. It's time for you to be defeated, Zabuza. If you haven't noticed, you are in a very vulnerable position. You are standing still and held in one place but your jutsu. So good luck trying to avoid my attacks. He dashed across the water and Zabuza hastily pulled his sword from his back, and when Naruto got in range, he tried a horizontal slash but all he had hit was air. You're as large as it is, can only attack in two ways, whether by slashing sideways or slashing downward, leaving very few modes of attack, making it very easy to predict. Zabuza looked behind him and saw that Naruto was sitting on his sword. Naruto instantly reacted and attacked by slashing Zabuza across his back and launched him away from the sphere, effectively breaking the jutsu. Naruto also destroyed the water clone that kept Kurenai trapped, freeing her also. Zabuza was able to keep on the surface of the water but was faced with two Junins and a Genin that he had severely underestimated. He quickly turned and started to run, hoping to escape to fight another day. Kurenai, Kakashi and Naruto quickly gave chase and they had managed to slow Zabuza with well-aimed kunai. They soon trapped Zabuza against the trunk of a tree and closed in on him. Well, it seems that today you will see death, said Kakashi. Screw you, I will never die. I will not let. Two Senbon's needles flew down and struck Zabuza clean in the throat and he fell to the ground, his eyes losing their color. A mist hunter ninja appeared in a tree and said, I thank you Konoha Shinobi for helping me take down Zabuza. I had been tracking him for quite a while and only now have I been able to land the finishing blow. The hunter ninja walked over to Zabuza's body and picked it up. Now if you will excuse, I must dispose of this body. Of course, Hunter Nin. I expect us to see each other soon though, replied Naruto. The hunter ninja stiffened at Naruto's statement but disappeared nonetheless. Kakashi then grabbed his head and soon collapsed due to overexposure of his Sharingan eye. Kurenai and Naruto caught him and carried him over to the Genin where they were waiting. Several people in their reviews talked about how I am making Sasuke a complete wimp and but I'm going to say in my defense that Sasuke will turn over a new leaf throughout the story. His changes in attitude and other stuff are going to start happening though as a very slow pace. The first should start this chapter or next chapter. Tazuna led the exhausted ninja to his house that sat by a water edge. Narrator was carrying Kakashi with the help of Sasuke, and the rest followed behind. Tazuna opened the door and was greeted by his daughter. Father, you have arrived home now. And who are the people that are behind you? They are the ninja we hired for my protection. They will be staying here for a while. He turned around. You can put Kakashi down in one of the spare bedrooms upstairs so that he can rest. Until then, you can go see the city a bit before tsunami finishes so that we can eat dinner. Sasuke muttered something about needing to go train and Sakura followed him, like a lost puppy. Naruto had asked Hinata if she would like to go to explore the city, which she accepted after much stuttering and they both left the house. Kiba followed Hinata and Naruto after waiting several seconds and muttered something under his breath. Shino put several of his bugs on Kiba to keep an eye on him and went outside to look for bugs native this region. Kurenai just went upstairs to rest and to keep an eye on Kakashi. In the city, Naruto and Hinata were walking around the city and observing everything. Everyone was walking with depressed looks and everyone's clothing each had some level of shabbiness. A man crept up next to Naruto and attempted to reach into his bag to try to steal something of worth but was stopped when Naruto spun around and grabbed the man's wrist. I suggest you try to steal from someone else, sir. Or better yet, give up your life as a thief and try to forge a new one. Naruto let go of his hand and the man scurried off and disappeared in a crowd. Naruto saw a dango shop and led Hinata to it, buying several sticks and led Hinata over to a bench that no one was occupying. Wow, the situation is really bad in this town. Hinata only looked at Naruto's with curious eyes. What do you mean by that? Hinata, look at this town. You don't see any smiles or any children playing in the streets. Everyone walking the streets either have little money to spend or they are trying to steal to survive. It seems that Gato knows that this is happening and is just waiting for the right moment to kill Tazuna to send this town down into a hellhole and to control it with an iron fist. There was a long silence as Naruto and Hinata continued to eat their dango. Naruto then pulled out a scroll out of one of his pockets and summoned up his flute. He put it to his lips and played a few notes before starting to play a full song. Hinata just stared at Naruto before she felt the need to dance to the song. Their performance soon started to attract people, mostly younger children at first who were attracted by Hinata's dancing, which involved many hand and arm motions and her entire body spinning around. Adults were attracted by the music that was being played and found themselves watching the performance with odd eyes. Naruto and Hinata were so caught up in what they were doing that they did not notice they were being watched until Naruto had finished the song. The crowd that had gathered clapped and cheered for such a beautiful performance. Hinata blushed with so many people looking at her, and Naruto just rubbed the back of his head, giving the crowd thanks for watching them. The crowd soon dispersed and Naruto and Hinata were left alone again. So, Hinata, I suppose we should go back to Tazuna's house, then? Hinata silently nodded and they both headed off. As they were walking nearby the forest, they both heard someone that was crying. They went to investigate and saw that Sakura was sitting with her knees pulled close to her, tears falling down her face. Naruto walked up to her and placed an arm on her shoulder. Sakura, what's wrong? Sakura looked up and dived into Naruto's arms, bawling her eyes out. Naruto looked bewildered as he tried to find some way out of the situation. Sasuke-kun told me he doesn't like me and that I should leave him alone. He called me useless and not worthy of being a shinobi. What am I going to do? She continued to cry. Naruto's eyes hardened and he asked sternly, what happened? Flashback. Sakura was hiding behind a tree, observing Sasuke with hearts in her eyes. Sasuke was currently throwing shuriken and kunai at a makeshift target and all the weapons had hit right on target. Sakura squealed when she saw Sasuke do all of his moves perfectly. Sasuke's eyes shifted slightly when he had heard Sakura squeal, therefore making his final kunai completely off aim. Sasuke scowled angrily and walked up to Sakura with an angry look. Will you please get lost? Sakura could only look in shock as the crush of her life told her to go away. But it didn't stop there. I can't believe a useless girl like you ever became a shinobi. Sure, you had the highest grades in the class, but they doesn't mean anything in the real world. All of your skills are below average and compared to me and Naruto, you are the weakest link. So, why don't you go somewhere else and don't bother me, because I will never go out on a date with a weak girl like you," said Sasuke with the most venom he could muster. Sakura had tears coming out of her eyes and ran off in the forest to get away from Sasuke. Sasuke watched her run off with a smirk on his face. Flashback end. Naruto straightened up and picked Sakura up also. I see, Sakura. He let go of Sakura and she stood up on her own, although she was still crying. Don't listen to Sasuke, Sakura. Sakura looked up to look at Naruto. You have potential to be a great ninja. You just haven't realized it. Pining after Sasuke has not helped your situation and it will only continue to harm your skills. Sakura looked down at this statement. But Naruto cut her off. Sakura, I never said to not pursue Sasuke in a manner that is beyond teammates, but do not let it consume your life to the extent it will be bringing down yourself and the team. Hinata, could you please take Sakura back to the house? I still have some business to attend to. Hinata nodded and led Sakura with a comforting arm around Sakura. Hinata turned around in time to see Naruto disappear in a swirl of leaves. With Sasuke's training, Sasuke was now currently pummeling a tree with kicks and punches, wondering why he was not as strong as Naruto and why he didn't have the power to kill Itachi yet. He suddenly felt a fist connect with his face and he flew back several feet. He hit the ground and his tasted blood in his mouth. She propped himself up with his arms and saw Naruto approaching him, eyes gleaming red. The Dobi want to fight. Ha, this will be an easy win. Sasuke jumped up and dashed at Naruto, fist back to punch Naruto in the face. Naruto moved his body slightly to the side and Sasuke completely missed his target. Naruto quickly summoned out his bow and arrow and shot several quick shots at Sasuke. Sasuke had almost run into a tree after he had missed Naruto with his punch and turned around to face Naruto again, only to see several arrows flying at him. He covered his face instinctively but the arrows had hit his clothes instead and pinned him up against a tree. "Dobi, let me go from this tree. So I can kick your ass." "How about no, Sasuke? Is that a word that you hear a lot or it is a word you refuse to hear?" He walked up to Sasuke and glared at him for a few seconds. "The reason why I have currently pinned you up against the tree is because of what you did to Sakura." Sasuke just scoffed and said, "What about her? She just a weak girl that is a hindrance." Naruto walked and gave another hook to Sasuke's face. "So, that is all you see her as, a weak girl? You don't see her as a teammate, a comrade? I know that she likes you but there was not reason to reject her. You could have just declined and say you weren't interested and she would have backed off. But no, you had to deny her in the most evil way you could think." "You are worse than trash, Sasuke," replied Naruto coldly. "How dare you say that to me? I have done nothing to her and she will probably be back here pestering me again soon," countered Sasuke. "Are you so blind that you failed to notice that you sent Sakura away crying her eyes out? Are you that heartless you would disregard everyone that cares about you or consider you a friend? Would you just throw their lives away so that you could gain power, Sasuke?" Sasuke tried to think of an answer or a comment to say back, but he couldn't. "I will take your silence as an answer that you don't consider me or Sakura as tools that can be thrown away at a moment's notice." Naruto walked up to the tree and removed the arrows and Sasuke just sank to the ground in deep thought. "Just remember this, even though I don't consider you a close friend, we are still teammates, which means I will lay my life down for you if the situation ever rises, as I am sure Sakura would too. The question is, will you be able to put down pride, work for the team and sacrifice yourself if needed?" Sasuke gave no answer and continued to sit there. Naruto turned around and walked back in the direction of Tazuna's house. "I must say, Naruto, you sure gave the Uchiha boy a lot to think about and it seems you may have changed him for the better." "I hope so, Kyuubi. I hope so." At Tazuna's house, Kiba was muttering darkly about a certain blonde-haired boy and how he was a girl stealer while Shino continued to eye him with a careful eye. Hinata and Sakura had come back and Sakura had calmed down by then, leaving only a red face and slightly unkempt hair as proof that she had been crying. Naruto returned with an impassive look on his face and asked if Kakashi had woken up yet. Everyone shook their head and Naruto sat down at the table. Tsunami soon announced that dinner was to be served and everyone sat down at the table, with the exception of Sasuke, who was still out in the forest somewhere, and Kakashi, who was still resting. The dinner passed in relative silence as everyone ate when the door opened and a young boy walked into the house. He looked at the fellow shinobi at the table and gave them a scoff. Tazuna spoke up, "Inari, why don't you introduce yourself to the shinobi that I have hired?" Inari gave a glare at the shinobi. "Why should I? They are all going to end dead at Gato's hand anyways." He looked at the food on the table. "I'm not hungry." He walked up the stairs and disappeared out of sight. A deafening silence washed over the table before Hinata asked, "Why did Inari act like that?" Tazuna and Tsunami looked at each other but couldn't bring themselves to say anything. Naruto stood up and walked to a set of pictures that lined the wall. His eyes settles on one that had Tazuna, Tsunami and Inari, but also an unfamiliar man. They were all smiling in the picture. Naruto thought for a second and said, "Inari's behavior probably involves this man in the picture here, right?" Tazuna could only look away before saying, "You're right, Naruto. A while back, that man was a hero to this town and Inari saw him as a hero and a father figure. He wasn't Inari's biological father, but it was the closest thing to Inari could have had." Tsunami was going to ask to be married to him soon after that photograph, but something happened. That man openly opposed Gato and Gato made sure to remove him. One day, he was shown as a traitor and a thief and Inari had to watch as his hero and his father figure being denounced as a traitor. He was executed right in front of Inari's eyes and Inari has changed since that day. He was no longer a happy child and he always keeps to himself, no matter what Tsunami and I try to do. The genin all seemed affected to a certain degree, and Naruto silently walked up the stairs to try and have a talk with Inari. Naruto came to Inari's room but paused when he heard crying coming from the room. He opened the door to create a small slit and looked inside. He saw Inari, on a table that was facing a table, and he was clutching something to his chest. Naruto decided not to go in and let the small boy cry out his emotions. The next morning, Kakashi woke up rubbing his head and wondering how long he had been sleeping. He saw that he was in a futon and got dressed in his clothes that were nearby. He walked down the stairs and appeared in the dining room where all the genin and Kurenai were eating breakfast. Kakashi caught Kurenai's eyes and it conveyed that they needed to talk. Kurenai got up from her seat and met Kakashi in the hall to talk. A few minutes later, they came back and both motioned to their genin to follow them. They stopped in a clearing in the forest and the genin stopped in front of their senseis. "Today, we are going to be training you. We want you to climb trees without using your hands," said Kakashi. "How in the world are we going to climb trees without our hands?" asked Kiba brashly. "Like this." Kakashi started to walk up the tree along with Kurenai and they soon stopped on a branch. They also stuck to the branch upside down. "You are to use your chakra to stick onto the tree. You need to focus your chakra to the bottom of your feet so that you will be able to stick on. Too much and the tree will push you off. Too little and then you won't be able to stick on. I suggest that you get a running start." Kakashi and Kurenai each threw 3 kunai to the students. "Mark the tree each time you are forced off or you fall off." All the genin focused their chakra to the bottom of their feet and everyone except for Naruto and dashed up the tree. Kiba immediately crashed into the forest floor after 3 steps. Shino and Sasuke had gotten up a good 20 feet before being forced off. Hinata and Sakura had reached a branch at a very high point of their tree and were now looking down at the boys. Naruto had still to attempt to try to climb the tree. Naruto kept his eyes closed and slowly started to walk up the tree. All eyes followed as he continued up the tree without falling off, and he ended up in the tip of the tree balancing on 1 foot. The very least to say that everyone was shocked that Naruto could do such a feat, and he jumped from branch to branch until he was down on the ground again. "Kakashi-sensei, would it okay for me to go train by myself now?" Kakashi just nodded his head and Naruto respectfully bowed and left the clearing with eyes all looking at him with varying degrees of emotions. All the other genin continued to do tree climbing. Later on in the day, Hinata was looking for Naruto and she had found him balancing on a kunai that was rammed into the ground by a single finger. Sweat was falling freely from his face as he maintained his focus on his balance and chakra output. Hinata could only watch as Naruto continued to stay in that position for another half-hour before he pushed himself off and laid on the ground, panting heavily. Hinata walked over and took out a piece of cloth that she carried around and knelt down next to him and wiped the sweat off his face. Naruto's face stiffened for a moment but relaxed when he saw that it was Hinata. Hinata continued to wipe his face until it was mostly clean and sat down next to Naruto. They continued to sit in silence when Naruto got back up and stretched his muscles. "How would you like to spar, Hinata? I would like to see how your training has gone." Hinata nodded and stood up, getting into her own stance, with her legs spread out and arms in front, bent at the elbow. Naruto stepped back with his fists, his left in front and his right by his hip. He dashed forward and threw his right forward. Hinata quickly sidestepped his attack and gave Naruto a palm strike to his shoulder that threw him off balance. Naruto quickly regained his balance and dashed back at Hinata, who this time took the hit but had jumped back at the same time, therefore lessening the damage, in which he struck back at Naruto with palm strikes to the inside of Naruto's arms. She quickly spun around after her strikes and kicked Naruto solidly in the stomach, sending him away again. Naruto landed on his feet but his arms felt numb and he felt very little chakra flowing through them. Well, it seems Hinata had been training very hard in her new style and it's starting to show now. Seems she can close tenketsu with her palms. I wonder what else she can do. Naruto stood up again and flexed his fingers, preparing to do a technique he had chanced upon when training against a dummy. He usually left dents in the dummy, but that one instance had shattered the area around the impact. He immediately started to investigate what had happened, and after several weeks of training, he managed to solve what was needed to do it to duplicate the punch. He grinned from behind his mask and disappeared in a flash. Hinata, who had been watching Naruto the entire time, gasped in surprise and quickly started scanning her surroundings to locate Naruto. She felt something behind her and dodged on instinct. Naruto had appeared from behind and had thrown a punch had missed. He continued to attack and Hinata skillfully dodged or pushed Naruto's hands to the side whenever he attacked. She kept dodging backward and soon found her back against a tree. She looked as Naruto bearing down on her and right before she was hit, she dodged off to the side, striking Naruto's left arm with several Juken strikes. Her eyes widened after her attack when Naruto's attack connected with a tree and an entire section of the tree exploded into splinters. Her shock left her open and she felt that Naruto was rearing back to punch her, and she didn't make any attempt to block the attack other than close her eyes waiting for the impact. She waited for several seconds but didn't feel any sort of contact and opened her eyes. Naruto had his fist in front of her but was grinning under his mask. "Well, it seems that I have won this little match, Hinata." He put his fist down and stretched his muscles, trying to get the feeling back in his muscles that had been struck. "But you are the taijutsu user. Your form was almost flawless and your movements helped lead you from one to another. Keep working on it and you could be one of the best taijutsu user. But it never hurts to learn ninjutsu and genjutsu too. Do that and you could also become one of the best kunoichi Konoha had ever produced." Hinata blushed at the compliments that Naruto was giving her but snapped out when Naruto continued to groan and stretch his muscles. "Can't see to get rid of the soreness in my muscles. Perhaps if I massaged it, you would feel better," squeaked out Hinata. Naruto looked at Hinata with curious eyes and nodded his head. Hinata walked up to Naruto and motioned him to sit down. He sat down cross-legged in the grass and Hinata sat down behind him and started to massage his back, in which Naruto relaxed in Hinata's hand. This continued for several minutes and Naruto soon felt all his muscles were relaxed and turned around to thank Hinata. When Naruto had turned around, Hinata was leaning forward to be able to relax Naruto further, and without any support to keep her up, she fell down on top of Naruto. Their faces were inches from each other and Hinata was blushing. She slowly moved her hand to Naruto's mask and started to pull away at his mask, and Naruto made no movements to stop her. She slowly started to pull it back but stopped when she suddenly fainted. She fell onto Naruto's chest and Naruto could only lie still wondering what could have happened. "Well, it seems my little Naruto has finally found a love interest. I can only wonder how this will turn out," said Kyubi from inside her cage. Several hours later at Tazuna's house. Everyone had come back to the house, eating dinner when Naruto came in carrying Hinata bridal style. Kiba instantly attacked. "What did you do to her, Naruto? I swear if you took advantage of her, I will rip from limb to limb." Naruto glared back. "If you must know, Hinata and I were training with each other and she had passed out from chakra exhaustion." Naruto knew he was lying but hoped that everyone else would believe him. Everyone made some form of approval except for Kiba, who growled at Naruto's answer. Naruto gave an inward sigh of relief and walked up the stairs to put Hinata into her futon. He went into the room that the girls were staying in and tried to place Hinata into her futon, but she didn't seem to want to let go of Naruto. Naruto struggled for several minutes before he gave up and decided to just let Hinata sleep and hope someone would come up to help separate soon. An hour later, Kurenai had decided to come up after the dinner to check where Naruto had gone, and when she opened the door, she was greeted with one of the most cutest scenes she had ever seen. Hinata was sleeping on the crook of Naruto's neck with her arms wrapped around his waist, while Naruto was sleeping with his head on top of Hinata's head and arms wrapped around her shoulder. Kurenai pulled out a camera and took a picture, persevering this moment forever. Naruto snapped awake when he heard the camera click and Kurenai was putting away something in her pouch. He eyed Kurenai suspiciously and asked, "What did you just do?" "Nothing, Naruto. I now possess the cutest photo in the world. Muwhahahahahaha. Naruto continued to look at her but looked away to look at Hinata. "Kurenai-sensei, could you please help try to get Hinata off of me?" Kurenai walked over and put her hands on Hinata's shoulders and started to pull her off, but Hinata resisted and latched onto Naruto even more. Naruto leaned in and whispered something, which relaxed Hinata and she let go without any resistance. Naruto got up and bowed toward Kurenai. "I will see you tomorrow, Kurenai-sensei." And he left the room. The next morning, Sasuke had gotten up early to continue to master tree climbing and was now starting to get frustrated as he looked at all the marks on his tree. He tried running up again and made a few inches farther than his last marks. He yelled in frustration and punched the ground, effectively bruising it. Now, he had a bruised hand along with the problem of tree walking. He heard chuckling behind him and whipped around to see Naruto behind him. Well, it seems that even the genius Sasuke is having problems climbing a tree. Sasuke threw his kunai at Naruto, only to have it caught and thrown back at his feet. So are you going to ask for help or are you going to stay frustrated and continue to perform poorly? Sasuke threw a glare at Naruto and was about to send him away when Naruto's speech flashed through his mind. What do I need to do, Naruto? First of all, you should calm yourself, so that you can focus your chakra better. After that, you should feel the chakra concentrated at the bottom of your feet before actually attempting to climb. Once you get the feel, you should climb the tree and then adjust the chakra amount if you fall off or if you are pushed off. Naruto stated. Sasuke did everything Naruto had said and found himself performing better and was able to reach 10 feet farther after several tries. He turned around to thank Naruto, but he had already disappeared. Over the next several days, with everyone completing the tree climbing exercise, everyone were assigned in pairs for guard duty of Tazuna and his workers, in case that there was an attack. The rest of the time was either used to train or relax, which a certain Inuzuka did a lot, stating that he didn't need to train as he was already powerful. Sakura, who realized what Naruto was true, started to improve herself through training. Sasuke was working on his own jutsu in order to improve and maybe be able to improvise. Shino had decided to work his clan jutsu. Naruto and Hinata, however, were a mystery to Kakashi and Kurenai, who had gotten information on their students except for them too. Naruto just said he would go train and would be back for his guard duty along with Hinata, who had the same story. Later at night, a ally androgynous figure was currently picking their way through the forest, looking for certain herbs that could aid in healing when the person stumbled upon Naruto, who was currently resting. Naruto rubbed his eyes and looked around and saw this person in front of him. "You know, you are going to get a cold if stay out in this weather too long," said the figure, whose voice couldn't really be identified as male or female. Naruto stood up and brushed off any dust that had collected on him. "I thank you for the advice, but why are you out at this late hour?" "I'm currently looking for herbs and plants that I can use to make some healing salves and the sort." "I see, would you like some help?" asked Naruto. "That would be nice." Naruto and the figure searched for about a half hour, filling up the basket with many different herbs and plants. Naruto held out his hand and the figure put their hand into his hand, shaking. "It was nice to meet you. Oh, what is your name?" "My name is Haku." "I see, Haku, or should I say Hunter Nin?" Haku tensed and prepared to throw senbons at an instant notice. "I am not here to attack but to rather get information." Haku didn't relax one bit and continued to be tense. "Obviously, you don't want to relax, so I will start with my questions anyways. First things first, why is a girl like you, ONW with a natural caring nature, doing with a missing nin like Zabuza? What makes you think that I am a girl? For all you know, I could be a guy." Haku snapped back. "Don't kid yourself. Just accept that you are a girl, and if you are a boy like you say, take off your shirt." Haku blushed and instinctively covered her chest. "That's what I thought. Now that we have gotten your gender down, why did you hide your gender and why are you working for Zabuza?" Haku looked down and said, "Bekasu, in a shinobi world, women are looked down upon more than men are. Women who become shinobi can be viewed as the strongest in whatever they do, but they are often overshadowed by the achievements of men. No doubt there are women who had made great achievements, but they are outnumbered by the achievement of men. As for Zabuza, he was the first person to see as a human being and some piece of trash on the road." Naruto at this point had already heard all the pain and sadness Haku had been through. "He took me in, but I disguised myself as a boy to appear strong and not allow my female side to show. Zabuza has not yet found out my secret, and but yet you, a genin, had found out." "What is your name?" "My name is Naruto Himura Uzumaki, and I have seen and experienced more than I show." He looked around and noted it was already dark. "Well, Haku, I hope when we meet again, we won't be enemies and we can talk more. Because I can tell that you are in need of much healing." "I thank you for the offer, Naruto." "I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm afraid our next meeting will be our last, though I hope it won't." Naruto was eating dinner with Team 7 and Team 10 when Inari had walked through the door and stalked his way over to his seat. He stared down at the food placed down in front of him for a little while before he burst out. "I don't get why all you people are here. Gato is just going to kill you all and win again." All the ninja just looked at him with different looks in their eyes but said nothing in response, except for one. "So, what you want for us to do if to just surrender, leave this town and continue to let Gato terrorize this town?" Naruto said in a calm voice. "Do you want us to forget the hard work that Tazuna has already put into the bridge and the sacrifices this village has given for a second chance? What do you know about living like this? Living in fear? Losing the person you admired most?" Inari screamed back. Naruto had grown deathly silently at this statement. "So, at least you knew who your parents were. Mine had disappeared after I had born, so I didn't know who they were. I was always under the protection of ninja when I was young before I was taken away from the village by my sensei and father. Even then it wasn't easy, always traveling and training in harsh conditions and facing death every time we met with bandits or missing nins. Coming back to my village several years later, I was still met with harsh glares and whispers for something I was unaware about. Then my sensei left to go travel the world again without me and I was forced to live alone again, fending for myself. And now, you are coming to me saying that you have suffered so much? Try living in my how I live and you would see what it means to suffer." Naruto gave Inari a dark glare that made everyone shiver before he got up from his seat and went upstairs, leaving everyone looking at his back with a dead silence. There was silence around the table for a minute before Sakura spoke out. "Is that true, Kakashi-sensei?" "Honestly, Sakura, I can't tell you. Naruto's past is shrouded and I doubt even the Hokage knows much about what happened in his time away." Hinata had quietly slipped away from the table to go find Naruto. She looked into his room but didn't find him but noticed that the window was open and music was drifting in. She went over and poked her head out and Naruto was sitting on the roof, playing his flute. Hinata made to climb up but decided not to and just stay inside by the window listening to Naruto's playing. The next day, Kakashi and Kurenai were walking with Tazuna and the genin except for Naruto who they had decided to allow him take the day off after yesterday's speech. They arrived at the bridge and Tazuna saw all of workers either dead or unconscious. Tazuna ran up to one of the workers who was still conscious. He grabbed his shoulder and pulled his face up to his. "Who did this to you?" The man rasped out, "A demon." He collapsed onto the ground and Tazuna let of the man's shirt. A mist started to roll in and everyone tensed up and the genin surrounded Tazuna. Kakashi and Kurenai both looked through the mist and saw two figures. Well, it seems that Kakashi is strong enough to fight again. But, I know how to defeat you and the women now and my apprentice will take each of your students with no problem," said Zabuza. "Are you sure about that? If I remember correctly, you were the one who barely escaped with their life last time and you think you were going to win this time?" Kakashi replied. "You think I came unprepared this time? Why do you think I summoned this mist? If you can't see me, you can use your Sharingan and the women can't use her Genjutsu, which mean I have removed your strongest moves already. Hiku here will just finish off your weak genin and we will get paid for our job." Hiku dashed forward and pulled out senbons and threw them at Tazuna with perfect aim. Sasuke and Hinata both pulled out two kunai and blocked all the senbons. They both looked at each other simultaneously before dashing forward to engage Hiku. Meanwhile, with Naruto woke up to a sudden clatter and commotion outside and quickly dressed himself. He put all of his gear on and quietly crept down the stairs, stopping several steps to listen to what was happening. "If you even kill my son, I'll bite my tongue in half and drown myself in my own blood." "Fine, lady. Tazuna wants a live hostage anyways. Be lucky your mom is doing this for you, or else you would be dead." There was the sound of feet moving and a door being closed. Naruto quickly walked down the rest of the stairs and saw the back of Inari just go out the door after Tsunami. Naruto quickly followed and saw Inari facing off before two men who were wielding katana. "Well, it seems the little boy wants to meet his death. Just remember that we warned you." One of the men charged Inari and Inari could only stand and watch as the man rushed him, katana prepared to swing down. He closed his eyes but he heard a clang of metal and opened them up again. He saw Naruto with his katana out blocking the swordsman's strike and pushed him away. "You men will die today for trying to involve innocents in your master's plots." Do you have any last words? The swordsmen were about to scoff and go and kill Naruto until they looked at Naruto again and instantly started to fear for their lives. Naruto had waves of killing intent directed at them and his eyes were a deep amber, with slits for his pupils. One of the swordsmen cried out, "If you move another step, we will kill the women." He put his blade to Tsunami's throat to prove his point. "Useless," Naruto said before disappearing. Both swordsmen frantically looked around before the one holding Tsunami gave a cry of pain, having been cut his half from behind. The other swordsman pulled out his sword futilely before he saw Naruto dash as him. He swung his sword down hoping to hit him and he actually made contact, or that what it seemed before that Naruto disappeared. Naruto appeared behind him and sheathed his sword. When the handguard touched the sheath, the man fell into two separate pieces on the ground. Inari ran over to Tsunami, who swept him up into a hug and cried into her shoulder. "Inari." Inari looked over at Naruto, whose back was facing him. "About yesterday, I apologize for yelling at you. I know how hard a life like your can be, but that doesn't mean you should run away from all your problems. Your would-be father could have had said the same thing. He faced Gato knowing he would eventually face the consequences of his actions, but he didn't care as long as it was for the town. He lived a life that should be honored, Inari, not one to be cried over. But today, you showed some of his courage by rushing out to face the swordsman knowing you were severely outmatched." Naruto looked at the dead bodies for a moment. It seems now that Gato has made his move, and that means. Naruto's eyes flashed in realization. "I must leave now. Remember what I said, Inari." And he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Back at the bridge, Sasuke and Hinata were trapped inside a dome of ice mirrors and had several senbons in various areas of their body, and both were breathing very heavily. All attempts to attack Haku were repelled and Hinata and Sasuke were forced to play defensive. Hinata's Byakugan was starting to become strained and she could only barely see faint amount of chakra but couldn't pinpoint the source. Sasuke's Sharingan had activated in the middle of the battle and he was using it also to track Haku and was slowly catching on to Haku's movements. Naruto, who was now nearing the bridge, noticed the ice mirrors and dashed forward to assist whoever was inside the ice mirrors. Haku saw Naruto approaching at a quick pace, had decided to finish the two off before he arrived. She pulled back her hands with two senbons in each and threw one pair at Hinata. Naruto arrived at the dome to see the senbons hit their target. Hinata fell to the ground and Naruto rushed over, not paying attention to Haku who was aiming for him. Naruto was holding Hinata's body when Hinata whispered out, "Naruto, before I go, I want to tell you something." Naruto looked at her and she leaned closer to his ear. "I want to say that Hinata's voice cut off and she fell limp in Naruto's hands. Sasuke was moved at this sight but felt a sudden spike of killing intent. He turned and saw Haku aiming senbon needles at Naruto. Sasuke saw this and a thought unconsciously flashed through his mind. "Sakura and I would be willing to give up our lives to save yours. The question is, would you be willing to do the same if the situation arises?" The thought flashed through Sasuke's mind repeatedly until he moved forward. Naruto felt an attack coming from behind but made no movements to dodge. He suddenly felt his body being pushed aside and he turned his head in shock to see Sasuke being hit in the throat with the senbon needles. Naruto could only look on in shock as he saw another one of his friends die with any way to save them. He heard Sasuke whisper and he rushed over, "I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm sorry for being such an arrogant jerk and not accepting your friendship from the beginning. You hoped to change that, but it seems it all going to end now." And with that said, Sasuke closed his eyes forever. Naruto started to feel rage build up in him as he saw Hinata and Sasuke lie, cold and motionless. A giant plume of red chakra exploded from Naruto and his fox features started to reform. Haku tried to attack Naruto while this was happening, but the attacks were all repelled by the chakra. Kyuubi inside Naruto was trying to get Naruto to calm down, but his rage was blocking her from effectively communicating. Seems I will need to wait this out and talk to him when his mind is not clouded by rage. Naruto stood up and faced Haku, who was in her ice mirror trying to figure out what to do. Naruto's eyes had become a deep crimson and he looked at Haku, with eyes of hate, and summoned both swords, his Sakabato in his left with a reverse grip and his katana in his right. He spoke out in a threatening voice, "Today, Haku, for taking the lives of two people important to me, you will face my wrath and you will wish that you were never alive." Naruto disappeared in a flash and Haku looked around to see where Naruto had gone. Her shinobi senses started to flash dangerously and she jumped out of the mirror into a different one when the one she was previously occupying was slashed in half by Naruto. Naruto landed on the ground and looked at the remaining mirrors and disappeared again and slashed again at the mirror Haku was in only to have her dodge at the last second into another mirror. With Kurenai and Kakashi, both of them turned their heads in alarm when they felt the same sickening chakra from 13 years ago. They both thought at the same time, has the nine-tailed fox escaped from his prison? It's time for us to finish this. They both looked at each other and nodded knowing what each had to do. Kakashi pulled out a scroll from one of his jacket's pocket. Kurenai moved forward and Kakashi smeared blood over the scroll. Kyuchu's no jutsu. There was a large puff of smoke and 9 unseen objects moved towards Zabuza. Zabuza had felt the chakra too and could only shiver in fear and wonder what was releasing such evil chakra. He saw movement in front of him and swung his sword out at the target, only to have his arms and legs being bitten and held fast. He looked down to see his arms and legs being held down by dogs of various sizes. Kakashi and Kurenai both noted that the fog was starting to clear up and they soon saw Zabuza being held fast by Kakashi's summons. Well, it seems the mighty Zabuza isn't so mighty anymore. You thought this mist would bring you victory because you sealed away our strengths? You seem to forget that are 4 other senses that a shinobi uses and you forgot that. And now to show you the only jutsu that I have created. Kakashi flashed through several hand signs. Almost seemingly, lightning started to form around Kakashi's forearm and it crackled with power. Zabuza's eyes widened in fear and he struggled against the dogs. Today, Zabuza Momochi, you die. With Haku. Haku was sent flying away from her last mirror by a chakra-enhanced fist. She hit the ground roughly and tried to stand up again. She could only prop herself on his elbows to see Naruto approaching her, swords held on his sides. She tried her hardest to move but her muscles screamed in protest and she fell to the ground in defeat, waiting for her imminent death. Naruto stood over her body and stared at her with cold eyes. You ended the lives of my important people, Haku, and now it's time for me to end yours. He raised his katana above his head and prepared to bring it down. Haku could only watch as Naruto was going to bring about her death but it never happened. She looked up and saw Naruto staring at her with eyes of hatred and anger and said, if you aren't going to kill me, Naruto? What will your friends think of you? Angry that you never avenged their deaths? So hurry, before you lose your chance. So be it, then. Naruto prepared himself to swing down when he received the loudest mental shout possible from Kyuubi from within his mind. Naruto, calm yourself this instant. Look carefully into Haku's eyes. What do they tell you? Do you see malice or hatred? Naruto looked into Haku's eyes and one again saw the emotions of sadness and loneliness. No, but she killed Hinata and Sasuke. Naruto quickly countered. Are you sure? Have you forgotten what happened to Zabuza? He was hit in the same pulse and yet he is still walking and breathing, isn't he? Naruto realized this and his chakra started to fade away along with his fox features. He looked down at Haku and asked, why did you lie? Why do you lie about killing Hinata and Sasuke? No response came from Haku and Naruto grabbed the front of Haku's outfit and pulled her closer. Tell me, I did it because I am a tool. A tool that has now lost its worth to its owner. Naruto gripped Haku harder. How could you possibly think that way, Haku? Every person has worth. Haku looked at Naruto and only shook her head. I have failed at the one thing for my precious person. Zabuza was the only person to see me as a human being and not a piece of trash on the road. My mother had cared for me when I was young but because of the fear of bloodlines where I lived. Unfortunately, I was controlling water when my father had seen it without my mother knowledge. The same night, my father had killed my mother and proceeded to kill me when I lashed out and killed my father and his friends. I ran away and lived on the streets, disguising myself as a boy. Zabuza soon found me and he trained me up to be a weapon. But I have failed him now, I no longer have a purpose. Naruto pulled his hand back and slapped Haku straight across the face. Haku cradled her cheek and looked at Naruto with hurt eyes. No one should ever talk like they are a tool, Haku. You are a human being, not an emotionless robot that listens and follows. You may have failed as Zabuza's tool but that doesn't mean that you should give up on life. Naruto extended a hand to Haku. Maybe you can start a new life in Konoha. Haku was about to take Naruto's hand when they both felt a large surge of chakra and the sounds of 1,000 birds chirping was heard. I apologize, Naruto, but it seems I won't be able to take your offer. Haku moved away from Naruto at an abnormal speed. Naruto swore and quickly dashed after Haku. He trailed behind her by a few seconds and she was standing in front of Zabuza, with Kakashi bearing down starting to thrust his lightning-charged hand forward. "Kyuubi, is there anything you can do to help me? Do these hand seals and it should help you." Kyuubi flashed him a series of hand seals which Naruto sped through with precision. He made the last hand seal and he disappeared in a flash of fire. Haku was staring at Kakashi with unemotional eyes, awaiting her impending death, wondering what life would have been like if she was still going to be alive when Naruto reappeared in front of her and pushed her off to the side. She could only watch in horror as Naruto was impaled through the area right above his heart and he coughed up blood as he struggled to stay conscious. Kakashi's eyes reeled in shock as he had just impaled one of his students and quickly withdrew his hand, leaving a bloody hole in Naruto's chest and blood running freely from the wound. Naruto fell face first to the ground and his breath soon became haggard and he struggled to stay conscious. In Naruto's mind, "God damn it, Naruto. Did you have to throw yourself in front of a jutsu that would have killed you if Kakashi had just hit a few inches lower?" "Well, I had to do something. I couldn't just let Haku throw away her life so easily," countered Naruto. "That doesn't mean that you should throw yourself in front of an incoming attack. You should be happy I am healing the gaping hole in your chest or else you would be dead. This is going to take only a couple of hours to close up but probably about a week to heal completely, which will give me time to drill some common sense into your head." Naruto chose at that moment to open his eyes again and try to gain his bearings for what was happening. He saw that Zabuza had been released from his hold by the dogs and a large mob of what looked like hired men were facing off against the ninja. He tried to stand up and wobbled around before steadying himself. "Pathetic. You call yourself the demon of the bloody mist, and yet you were defeated in such a manner, Zabuza. But to tell you the truth, I was never going to pay you anyways. Missing ninja are so easy to deal with as they have no allegiance and can be easily killed off when the job is done. Then, I can hand in the body for a nice sum of money," said Gato, from behind his mob of hired hands. "It seems that this village hasn't given up. Well, I guess it's time for to forcefully take this on. Men, kill all the men in this village and take as the women as prisoners so we can sell them off as salves and for my own pleasures." He looked at Kurenai, Sakura and the recently conscious Hinata. "Especially the Kunoichi. I have special plans for them," he said in a perverse tone. Naruto's eyes had flared up at this speech Gato had given and he picked up his katana with his right hand from the ground and slowly walked forward, chakra starting to roll off in waves with each step he took. Everyone present looked at the source of chakra and saw Naruto walking forward toward the mob with a calm face but a deep anger in his eyes. "Today was the wrong day to come out of your rat hole, Gato. Even though your hands are clean of blood of your works, your soul is bloody and therefore you will be killed today." Naruto slipped into a stance with the sheath in his left hand and sword in his right. "What am I paying for you men? Kill that boy and earn your pay," Gato bellowed out. All the men charged toward Naruto and one broke out ahead of the group and raised his sword above his head, hoping to cleave Naruto in two. Sadly, his chance never came and Naruto stuck him with godlike speed and the man fell to the ground in a bloody heap. The charging men continued their charge hoping to overwhelm Naruto. Naruto moved forward with inhuman speed and struck, killing 3 men with each strike, and soon more than half of the hired army was dead, lying in pieces. The rest of the men had scattered, not wanting to face death by such an unrelenting enemy. Gato was at the end of the unfinished bridge, nearly soiling himself as he watched Naruto slowly walk forward. "I'll do anything. I'll give you money, women, anything. Just don't kill me," Gato said as he fell to his knees begging for his life. Naruto looked at him with cold eyes. "Why should I show you mercy when you weren't going to show mercy to this town? How about all the people you removed in order to gain all of your wealth? Once again I state, your hands are not bloody but your soul is." Naruto raised his katana to prepare for Gato's death. He suddenly put his katana down and indicated for Kakashi to come over. Kakashi came over and Naruto whispered something in his ear. Kakashi nodded his head several times and gave thumb-ups to Naruto. "It seems that you lucked out today, Gato. I won't kill you. Gato bowed several times before Naruto thanking him for sparing Hai and was making promises that he would change while in his mind he was already making plans to get revenge. You ever said we were going to let you go? We are turning you over to the villagers and I'm sure that they can think up to keep you locked as long as possible. Also, your considerable wealth could be used to help this town, something you won't be using for a long time. As if on cue, a large majority of the villagers rallied by Inari had come to the entrance of the bridge only to be met with a gruesome sight of body pieces, blood, and Naruto leading a defeated-looking Gato into their hands. I turn Gato over into your hands to await punishment. At that moment, Naruto's body collapsed on itself and he crumpled to the ground completely exhausted, body and mind. The last thing he saw were several people running at him. A week later, Naruto slowly opened his eyes, groaning as his body was very stiff and it was difficult to move around. He had gone through intense training under Kyuubi's watch and his mind was still very tired from the never-ending training. He felt a weight on his chest and saw a sleeping Hinata. He put his hand on her shoulder and shook her awake. She awoke very slowly and saw a smiling Naruto or what she could make out from behind his mask. She quickly drew him into a hug but quickly let go from embarrassment. Naruto stood up again but nearly fell down but was supported by Hinata. They walked down the stairs and were greeted with the sight with the Konoha ninja and surprisingly Haku and Zabuza. I take it that you have decided to take my offer, Haku? Naruto asked. Haku gave a curt nod and said, I told this plan to Zabuza and he also thought it was a good idea. So, we would like to become Konoha shinobi if you would allow it. Another week later. The Konoha ninja with Haku and Zabuza were now standing on the newly completed bridge and were all packed to return back to Konoha. The entire village had come to see them off and was giving their goodbyes until the next time they would see again. Inari was saying his goodbye to Naruto when he started to tear up. Well, look who is crying again. Naruto said. I'm not crying, I got something in my eye. Inari said back while rubbing the tears from his eyes. Naruto kneeled down and put his hand on Inari's head. There's nothing to be ashamed about when you are crying tears of happiness. Remember to become strong. Naruto stood back up again and ran to catch up with the group that was leaving. So, what do you propose we name the bridge? Said a villager. Tazuna looked at Naruto's retreating back and said, how about the Great Naruto Bridge? The villagers all murmured their consent and soon a cheer was heard. To the Great Naruto Bridge. That's all for my now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.